All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for noting the new time of 7 p.m. I'd like to welcome you to the January meeting of the Downers Grove Public Library Board of Trustees. I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order at 7:02 p.m. If you could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We acknowledge that the Downers Grove Public Library sits on the unceded, traditional, and ancestral homelands of Native peoples. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the indigenous peoples who have been caretakers of the land throughout generations past and present. We invite you to learn more about the genocide and forced displacement by non-Native settlers and the ongoing injustices against Native peoples. Caitlin, can you proceed with roll call?
Trustee Doherty.
Here.
Trustee Humphries.
Here.
Trustee Kuntia.
Here.
Trustee Nienberg.
Here.
Trustee Sladak.
Here.
President Gagani.
Here. Thank you. Item 4 is the approval of minutes. We'll start with the November 15th, 2023 regular minutes and December 13th, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes.
I will make a motion to approve the November minutes and the December minutes.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. We'll open the floor for any comments or questions. All right, we can go ahead and proceed with a voice vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes from November 15th, 2023 and December 13th, 2023, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And all those abstaining? All right, those meeting minutes have been approved as presented. Item 5 is our financial matters. We've got November 2023 financial report, December 2023 invoices, December 2023 financial report, and January 2024 invoices. It's a big one.
It's always a big one in January when the December meeting is canceled. You can see by the November reports that our revenues were over 100% by the end of November. Our capital expenditure was at 94% with a couple of invoices still outstanding for the VAV replacement project, and our general fund was at 85% expended at that point. Our December revenues report, now remember these are unaudited, so there are always some little changes that are made by the auditors before the year ends becomes official, but this gives us a really good sense. Our December revenues was at 103%. We were just under $188,000 over our estimated revenue. Our capital expenditures were at 100.6%. We went a tiny bit over in our VAV replacement, and then 96% expended by the end of December in the general fund. And I will be happy to answer any questions.
Can you remind me what the line 547, the other equipment R&M, what kind of falls into that category?
That is repair and maintenance of things that don't have maintenance contracts. So it can be repairs to the sprinkler system or repairs to, like a small carpet replacement if we hire that out, that sort of thing.
Some of the machines in access as well.
Yeah. Oh, and that's right. There are also like the disc cleaning machine in the access services.
Gotcha.
Do we want separate motions for November and December financials, or can we bundle them together?
You can do a bundle in one day.
I'll move to approve the November and December financials as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the November and December financials as presented. Any other questions before we proceed with a roll call? All right,
Is that including the January invoices too?
I think we'll tackle those
And the
separate.
January invoices.
And January, okay.
I'm just making sure it's on record.
you.
Mhm. Good.
Yeah.
Trustee Doherty.
Yes.
Trustee Humphries.
Yes.
Trustee Kuntia.
Yes.
Trustee Nienberg.
Yes.
Trustee Sladak.
Yes.
President Gagami.
Yes. All right, the financials have all been approved. Thank you. All right, we're on to item number 6, which is public comment. Just a quick reminder before we open the floor that all public comments should be directed to the Board of Library Trustees. The board requests that members of the public limit their comments to 3 minutes, a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker, and 30 minutes total for public comment are allowed. And as always, please be respectful of each other, and please refrain from applause and other outbursts. We'll go ahead and get started.
I've asked this board to censure Julie and Jen for their unprofessional and unethical behavior, specifically for repeatedly and blatantly lying. My emails to this board went into detail of each incident that they lied. I provided all of you with email evidence that all of you could easily check. Yet only the board president responded, and she would not even explain why she refused to censure them. No other board members responded to my emails. I am willing to sit down and go over the evidence of their lying, but you do not want to do that because you would have to confront the truth, that they lied. And that would expose all of you as hypocrites. Instead of knowing the truth, all of your self-proclaimed progressives would rather remain perched on your thrones of intolerance and bigotry. Julie and this board fondly issue pompous, self-righteous proclamations that condemn others for their perceived unethical behavior. Yet when confronted with real evidence of unethical behavior by the director and the assistant director, this board becomes mute. This board lacks the courage to do what is right, to hold people accountable for their behavior. So the two Pinocchios go online, and the bobble-headed library board goes on nodding. William Safire, the former political columnist for the New York Times, famously called Hillary Clinton a congenital liar. Mr. Safire missed the mark. It seems all progressives are congenital liars. A stated goal of you proud progressives is to act as a catalyst for change. Julie, the residents never gave you a mandate to use the library as a catalyst for your progressive ideology, an ideology that is intolerant, divisive, and bigoted. Too harsh a judgment? Let us examine the consequences of the progressive radical agenda on college campuses. On college campuses across America, especially at the Ivy League campuses, the self-proclaimed bastions of progressivism and of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we see the disciples of this ideology calling for the genocide of Jews. These progressive college students stand shoulder to shoulder with pro-Hamas demonstrators who defend and cheer the terrorist actions that occurred on October 7th. These progressive college students chant from the river to the sea. This chant calls for the complete destruction of the state of Israel and thus the genocide of the Jewish people. These are the students who have been indoctrinated on the vile and repugnant ideology of DEI. These are the same college students who claim to be tolerant, compassionate, and not hateful. Yet they attend pro-Hamas demonstrations and scream from the river to the sea. They stand in solidarity with terrorists calling for the genocide of the Jewish people. They call for another Holocaust. Yes, Julie, these are the fruits of your progressive politics and the board members who meekly acquiesce to your war progressive agenda. What we are witnessing on college campuses these last 3 months is a result of the poisonous, progressive ideology that teaches young people to hate, to be bigots, and to be intolerant. David, at the last meeting, you redefined the word genocide. Under your definition, genocide included assimilation and forcing people to adopt a different style of dress. David, that is not the definition of genocide. What the Aztecs attempted to do to their indigenous neighbors, what the Nazis attempted to do to the Jewish people, what the Turkish attempted to do to the Armenians, what China is currently attempting to do to the Uyghurs, and what Boko Haram are doing to the Christians in Nigeria is genocide. Your definition, David, mocks the victims of genocide. As stated on the website of Downers Grove Library, Julie wants to model behavior that she would like to see in this community. No thanks, Julie. We don't want lying to be the norm, and we do not want to see your intolerant, bigoted, progressive ideology in Downers Grove.
You're not supposed to apply.
No clapping.
Thank you.
No clapping.
No doubt.
No clapping. She said no clapping.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Marcia Pritchison. I'm a Downers Grove resident and a proud library patron. While waiting for the last library board meeting to begin, I was ridiculed because I use a cane. It would seem that, because I support this library, I am now subject to the same harassment as our library employees. I might have been hurt by this malicious slur, but I realized that the individual who mocked me for my disability is the same person who, month after month, disdainfully confronts you with poorly researched and inaccurate complaints about library security. So I presume that this is how he wants to be thought of, as someone who deliberately and spitefully demeans others. He was succeeded by a parade of people who also presented their grievances in the same disparaging manner. Appallingly, one of the trustees who, rather than support his colleagues, chose instead to obstruct the real business of this library and contribute to the unnecessary and unwarranted controversy regarding the land acknowledgement statement, giving a dissertation about his land acknowledgement statement, which, in accordance with his hubris, is far superior to the one that was approved 2.5 years ago after extensive research and consultation with experts in the field. This is not the first time this trustee has made it clear that his personal interests take precedence over the library's, regardless of how damaging they are to both the library and to the reputation of the village of the Downers Grove. Continuing his antagonistic approach in dealing with other members on the board, the same trustee later, while repeatedly proclaiming that he is a fiduciary guy, could not seem to tell the difference between the approved budget and the implementation plan, and again, willfully impeded the real business of this library. He even trotted out his brother-in-law to declare that this library should be disenfranchised from the village. I can only postulate that that individual, who could not seem to grasp the concept that it would cost taxpayers more money, not less, if the library were to become a separate entity, must be a fiduciary guy too. The obstruction of the genuine business of this library, the bullying, and the unrelenting contemptuous behavior seem to emanate from the position that this public library is not a private country club where membership is restricted. Here, the freedom to read is respected and protected. It is an inclusive, safe, and welcoming space for all. LGBTQ plus people and materials and programming for and about them have a rightful place here, and that seems to be intolerable for some who hold the very anti-American belief that those particular Americans deserve less representation than others. So I stand here in support of you 5 trustees who work earnestly and genuinely to support and elevate this public library. I stand in support of you, Director, who in only a few years has catapulted this library into a nationally recognized, award-winning library. And I stand in support of the employees who work every day to serve us all. Thank you.
Good evening. Eileen Greiner. I'm a resident. I'll get right into it because of the time constraint. I'm going to use page numbers from your packet tonight, and I'm going to address a couple things on the complete land acknowledgement statement. So I'm going to start with the first line on page 159, and it says the Downers Grove Public Library sits on unceded traditional ancestral homelands of Native peoples. Contrast that with the bottom of page 160. It says the Treaty of Chicago of 1833 stipulated that members of the Potawatomi living in the Chicago area had to leave, forcing them to cede approximately 5 million acres. Well, that would be this land. So we're either on unceded land or ceded land, but it can't be both. So one of them has to change. And I would recommend that line 1 be unceded, be stricken, and the line would read, the Downers Grove Public Library sits on traditional and ancestral homelands of Native people. On page 160, you've stricken the line that I've requested and substituted it with a line that I prefer. But then the next sentence says, students were stripped of all things associated with Native life, including having their hair cut, their clothes exchanged, and their language banned. Now, granted, this is our land acknowledgement statement, Downers Grove land acknowledgement statement, and we've had a local resident come here with evidence of his relatives who attended an Indian school in their native dress with their braids, and that they graduated speaking Ojibwe and English. So for our community, that sentence is not true, and I recommend that it be stricken. Moving on to page 162, the first paragraph, it says, Native Americans, like African Americans and other minorities, faced and continue to face numerous barriers to voting. This is political hyperbole. It moves well beyond land acknowledgement. We need to keep it concise. This line needs to be stricken. It has nothing to do with land acknowledgement. It's condescending to infer that Native Americans are too stupid to know how to vote. Our local Native American will address this as well. I don't think that the land acknowledgement statement needs to be read at board meetings, especially right after the Pledge of Allegiance. It's a slap in the face to every family who's lost a loved one defending this great country. Thanks for listening.
Good evening. I'm Noel Manley. I'm a resident of Darien, Illinois. And I'd like to begin by expressing my agreement with the statement that Board Member Humphreys made during the last November board meeting. He correctly expressed the sentiment that he wished we could go back to board meetings where there are only a few people in attendance. And I agree with that. However, I agree with that sentiment because only a few people should show up. And when that happens, it means that the library staff and the board are doing their job. However, when the library plunges itself into highly divisive political activity, like the RGW Discovery Report, which paints Downers Grove as a racist community, inappropriate drag queen bingo event for children, and the cultural appropriation through the native land statement, you can expect people to show up. Now, as I pointed out before, the land statement is a cultural appropriation used by the library to politically exploit Native injustice and paint this community as racist. There's nothing in this statement that identifies or outlines Native accomplishments. It is a white progressive equivalent of a cigar store Indian. In addition to your anti-Catholic statement, you falsely assert that Native people could not vote in every state until 1962. That is patently false. Of course, you conveniently leave out which states and under what circumstances. I can assure you that Native people from my tribe, the Ojibwe, of the White Earth Band of Ojibwe, have voted and continue to vote since at least 1934. However, in our tribal constitution, I'm unable to vote on tribal matters. Why? Because I don't live on the reservation. However, I don't consider this voter suppression. In fact, on my reservation, there are at least 2 active groups who are constantly vying for control of the tribal council. But that story does not fit into the narrative of the land statement. In fact, several years ago, our tribal chairman was convicted of mishandling tribal funds and casino funds. But that story, again, does not fit in the narrative. After him, our next tribal chairman was an Episcopal priest. But again, that story doesn't fit the narrative. Other examples of Native accomplishment in the face of adversity are glaringly ignored by the land statement. There's nothing about Civil War Union General Eli Parker, a Seneca native, who served with Ulysses S. Grant during his campaigns in Mississippi, Virginia, and was present for the surrender of the Southern Army at Appomattox Courthouse. Again, this does not fit the narrative. There's nothing in the narrative, or there's nothing about the greatest athlete this country ever produced, Fox native Jim Thorpe, also a Carlisle Indian Institute graduate. Again, he does not fit the narrative. There's nothing about Ojibwe Indian George Bender, a native who played 9 seasons with the Philadelphia Athletics, and, if you're a Chicago White Sox fan, managed the Chicago White Sox in 1925 and 1926. But again, that doesn't fit the narrative. And there's nothing about Pima Indian Ira Hayes, who was among the group of Marines who raised the American flag on top of Mount Suribachi during the Battle of Iwo Jima. I can go on and on, but I think you get the point. This document exploits Native injustice and is completely silent on Native accomplishments and ignores the vitality of Native culture. It is shameful and it needs to be rewritten. Thank you.
Do we have any more public comments?
Hi, my name is Ethan from Troop 57. I'm here for listening in and here for my merit badges, community citizenship in the community and communication. And it's lovely to be here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Debbie Anderson Phillips, and I'm here representing Quality Downers Grove, EQDG. I'm here to say that we're very excited to announce our 2nd annual One Book, One Town selection, which will be The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. We will again be partnering with the Downers Grove Library. We are so grateful for this partnership, and there will be events the week of March 11th to 14th, including book discussions and a party at various local restaurants, as well as here at the library. So thank you so much for your wonderful partnership with us. The House of the Cerulean Sea, the reason why we chose this book, it's a modern day fairy tale that provides a quirky and endearing portrait of what can happen when humans begin to question their judgments of others based upon appearance, assumptions, prejudice, and fear. Ultimately, it's a hopeful tale about learning to challenge preconceived biases and celebrate our differences, as everyone deserves to be safe, protected, and loved. So we hope that you'll all check out a book here at the library or purchase one at Anderson's. And thank you again so much.
Ed Briner, Downers Grove resident. Julie and the board continue to tell the community that the library is safe for children, and I disagree. In the board packet this month from November and December, you listed, it's kind of buried in the 330 pages, but you'll find 37 incidents in the library in a 2-month period. 6 times the police were called. That's not a safe environment. And I'd also like to request a correction in the November minutes where you accused me of not understanding what I said in November, where you said to me, I don't understand that police are not allowed in the building. I was saying you have no safety procedures here and there should be police in the building. So I'd like that stricken from the November minutes. Thank you.
Any other public comments? All right, this will conclude our public comment portion of the meeting. We'll move on to item 7, trustee comments.
What, do you want to go in order or just jump in? Excuse me. The first thing I'm going to do is correct the record, ma'am. I did not have my land acknowledgement statement. I referred to other organizations in the local area and their land acknowledgement statements. My motion last month was to create a council or a committee to develop a land acknowledgement statement that represented the entire viewpoints of the community. I don't have my land acknowledgement statement. Okay, to my surprise, this month's agenda included a brand new business item with a proposed revised land acknowledgement statement. When we adjourned in 2023, there were no plans to do this and no communication that this was happening over the break or at the end of the last board meeting. The proposed revisions include removing the sentence that unfairly singled out the Catholic Church and implied their outsized involvement in the schools and boarding schools that were used for the forced assimilation of Native Americans following the history of conflicts with settlers and later with the U.S. government and their armies. So, it's tempting to view this change as a win, and I congratulate the concerned citizens that raised this issue almost throughout the entirety of last year, and to be clear, I'll vote for this change out of respect for your efforts, if nothing else. But this deserves a more thorough unpacking. So let's get into the complete picture of the revision. This revision removes the offending sentence that has been discussed in numerous board meetings last year. But it still wades into and picks sides in such controversial matters as the Dakota Pipeline. It is still ultimately an exercise in victimhood that I feel diminishes and reduces Native Americans to their plight instead of honoring their accomplishments. In its totality, it's still a performative, virtue-signaling guilt trip that occupies a prominence in our board meetings and even in our children's area of the library that doesn't come close to matching the insignificant amount of Native American programming, which is basically less than 2% by my estimation, that happens at DGPL. And it still brokers in divisiveness. In fact, while it removed the direct Catholic slight, the new DGPL staff-developed revision added 4 new frequently asked questions. One is exclusively devoted to repackaging the one-sided account of the Native American schools, even going as far as to cite the Catholic Truth and Healing Organization, which, by the way, is in no way affiliated with the Catholic Church. And of course, my favorite, in one of the new frequently asked questions, they double down on the use of the circa 1940s term genocide to describe the history of conflict between the federal government and Native Americans, which, by their own account, included Native American tribes aligning with the British in the War of 1812, and certain tribes' direct declaration of war on the United States. War is inglorious and tragic with real lasting consequences, especially if you're allied with the losing side of the war. It doesn't necessarily make the war or the consequences right, but it also doesn't make it genocide. If you want to understand all the forces behind our current land acknowledgement statement, the DGPL staff included a helpful link on how to write a land acknowledgement statement from the Native Governance Center. And if you explore that site, you'll quickly find the motives in the Take Action section on the homepage. You'll learn that land acknowledgement is not enough. We must support Indigenous-led campaigns. Even if we think a pipeline is safe, creates jobs, helps our nation's energy independence, and thereby our national security, we have to support Indigenous-led campaigns. We also must donate time and money, and here's the kicker, commit to returning land to Indigenous people. It's always some version of follow the money, isn't it? Moving on, let's talk about the process by which this new land acknowledgement statement revision came about. And this is where I really take issue and want to engage with my fellow board members. In November, our last meeting of 2023, I made a motion to suspend the current land acknowledgement statement and place it in the hands of a to-be-formed committee so that we could collaborate, understand better, and ultimately reach a consensus on the Downers Grove land acknowledgement statement. This committee was to be made up, in the motion, was to be made up of citizens, staff, board members, experts, and maybe most importantly, local Native American patrons. You'll find my motion now buried on the last page of this month's 330-page board packet. But then, after months and months and months of comments from citizens, the DGPL staff suddenly decided to become responsive to better respond to continued questions. They took it upon themselves to meet internally, research on their own, and re-engage the same people who helped craft the original statement. What they found is remarkable. They found that researchers have shifted their approaches, that publishing data on the boarding school situation is a continual and evolving process, and that the current data sets no longer even identify denominational breakdowns. This is good news. Presumably, this means that these shifting approaches have shifted so as to not falsely accuse the Catholic Church of hiding mass burial sites that end up being complete fabrications, and that as a consequence, people are not burning down church properties and spitting on priests and nuns. No word from the DGPL staff on whether the researchers took any accountability for their previous dangerous and damaging approaches. But regardless, these new learnings and this new revision represents a remarkable turnaround, given that the very last revision, which is submitted to this board just 5 months ago, reaffirmed and even added citations to the claim against the Catholic Church. Now, unfortunately, this process that played out since November, by which this new proposed land acknowledgement statement was developed, did not include any of the citizens that raised concerns for the better part of the entirety of 2023. Sorry about that. It did not involve any of the people my motion proposed to be part of a committee. It did not even give the courtesy of informing this trustee who made the motion that there was a work in progress to address the concerns. Instead, in what is becoming a familiar pattern, the DGPL staff went off on their own, played judge and jury on what they were okay with changing, and somehow landed a motion on the agenda, effectively front-running my previous motion. Their motion includes a recommended action to pass their revisions tonight. My motion was submitted into the public domain with a chance for the public to digest it and comment on it because I, in contrast, actually respect the role of the public. The DGPL, however, is content to say, here is a mostly meaningless concession, pass it now, and go away, you pesky concerned citizens and you annoying trustee. From a legislative and a governance standpoint, I do not know even where to start on how backwards this process is. I do know where to start with my fellow board members, though. We have had recent conversations about how we need to change course, reduce divisiveness, create outreach even to people who have opposing views, even take pledges to detox from polarization. This process did none of that. And this revision changes nothing. It doesn't change how the land acknowledgement statement was created. It doesn't change the single-sided views that influenced it. It doesn't change how it was deployed, and it doesn't change how it is being used in the library. It doesn't take any steps at all towards consensus on what the Downers Grove community that funds this library wants to see in a land acknowledgement statement. More importantly, this shows that nothing has changed regarding the mindset or the behavior of the DGPL when it comes to activism that they decide to promote or when they encounter viewpoints that they disagree with. This is more of the same, more of a director and staff doing whatever they want and ignoring the subset of stakeholders they don't agree with. This community gets no opportunity to participate, there is no dialogue, there's no chance to listen and hear each other, and the beat goes on. And if we as a board allow this to happen and allow this backwards process to be okay, then frankly, we are insincere in our desire to change the course and improve the polarization. So my motion will presumably still come to the floor tonight. I am more than happy to work with you to amend it and shape it. My fear and suspicion is it won't even get a second. And if this happens, the message you will be sending is crystal clear. Thanks.
I'll go next. Thank you all for being here today. I was able to participate. The Park District is working on their strategic plan, and they invited everyone in the community. I think Hope saw the survey that they sent out, and I responded to the survey, and then I got an email saying, we know you're a trustee, we're going to be doing some sessions with leaders in the community, and we'd love it if you could come and represent the library. It was a really incredible experience. There were some village council members there, entities, different people representing different groups and Downers Grove organizations, and we really talked a lot about our community, what our community needs, how our community needs to work together better, ways that we can help each other, ways that we can get to know each other better. I think there's a lot of isolation, even though we're a small town, there's a lot of little isolated things that are happening and people don't always know what everyone else is doing. So we talked a lot about maybe the possibility of a different board member showing up with a different village council member and then someone for the Park District, and having maybe monthly meetings where we talk about what we're doing or what we would like to see in the community and what they would like to see in the community. It was really a great experience. I'm excited that I was able to do that. I wanted to actually just highlight some of the things that were in the packet. It was a very large packet, but I appreciated seeing some of the numbers. The programs were all up. The attendance is incredible. Circulation is like 1 million items checked out last year. That's amazing. And then I put one little thing that that caught my eye was the Lote for Kids. And I don't know if any of you have little kids, but this did not exist when my kids were little. My kids are teenagers. But there is a new app that you can download books on in like 55 different languages. And I was born and raised in America, but my parents came from India in the 60s. And the language that the part of India that my parents are from is very, very small. And so we never find anything in our language. It just doesn't exist. But on this random app, you can find books in my parents' native tongue, which my kids don't really know well. They know things like how do I go to the bathroom. They know like all the words that are like necessary, but they can't speak. So I downloaded some of the books for them. They're really, really for young children, but I'm like, you can read this. Anyway, just learn how to speak the language. So it's just exciting to see programming like that, and then I'm grateful that the staff is able to find some of these new apps that are gonna sort of open the world for all of our kids. Yeah, that's really all I have to say. I also want to quickly thank the staff for listening to the community and for updating the land acknowledgement. We have always said that it's a living document. The purpose of a living document is that it can be changed, that it should be changed, it should be updated as new research is made. And being a library, that's where we do research and that's where we learn more things. So I appreciate the staff, and they're the experts who reach out to other experts, and so that's all I have to say.
If somebody say this, I'll go first. First of all, I want to say I'm really excited about the one book selection for this year. I love TJ Klune and I love that book, so I'm really excited that it's our book. It's just a fabulous story, very whimsical, as you point out. So I'm really excited about that. Looking forward to the events surrounding it. But I have kind of a longer tale to tell. So in our November meeting, our community member, Mr. Briner, who spoke again tonight, stood in front of this board and the people assembled here and made a bold statement. DGPL is not safe for our children. And the same sentiment was echoed again tonight. And he said that night as well, kind of ominously, he uncovered maybe an even bigger problem and proceeded to cite differences in the number of calls made to the police versus what the library reported. So the library reported 15 versus those documented by the through FOIA requests that he uncovered from the Downers Grove Police Department, which was 41. So there's a difference there. So the implication being, if I'm being polite, or the accusation, if I'm taking his comments at face value, is that the library is being irresponsible and deliberately obscuring the truth about the safety of the library. For what reason is unclear. I'm not sure anyone here in this room wants the library to be an unsafe place, but maybe that motivation is irrelevant. As a side note, I will point out that some of the information that's been shared in this room in the past has actually been followed by real, actual threats to people in this room and to library staff members, which I find ironic, also sad and incredibly disturbing. So I, like most people in this room, I hope we want the library to be a safe place. So after hearing those statements, I got, and that gap, 15 versus 41, that's quite a gap. I got curious. So what accounts for that difference? I wasn't sure. Are the library staff involving the police in appropriate and relevant ways, as you've been talking about? Am I unwittingly involved in a nefarious Marxist plot? I always have to keep that in mind. So we requested the same information from the DGPD, and I spent a few minutes with it going over it because I was curious. So as I've said in previous public comments, I'm a pretty idealistic person, and maybe a bit naive when it comes to trust in human nature. So I'm willing to give Mr. Briner and others in this room the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he didn't realize that some of these police reports related to the library include calls made to the area around the library, so the parking lot and the street, and even the church across the street, not just the library property proper. And maybe he didn't know the library wasn't open at 9:44 p.m. on Tuesday, June 27th, or at 5:55 a.m. on Saturday, September 9th. Or that traffic stops or parking complaints aren't really the jurisdiction of the library, or that library building monitors aren't really responsible for stray animal sightings. So in fact, when you review the police information against the information provided by the library, both of which are public documents and took me less than an hour to review, it shows that out of those reports that were not accounted for the library, those were because 6 were outside of the library hours, so no one was here to even engage with the police or otherwise. 6 were outside of the library jurisdiction very clearly. It's a parking lot. It was in the parking lot. It was a traffic violation or an animal control call. 3 calls were canceled because the caller was gone on arrival. They arrived and no one was here. 2 were made by patrons without the library's knowledge for wellness checks, and I think that happens from time to time. We've heard about that. And 1 actually took place across the street at the church and not actually at the library. So and there's a couple more that really the library had no way of knowing or proactively taking action to help with these police calls. And in many cases, it was clearly not in the library's purview to do so. So maybe, Mr. Briner, you didn't know that. Maybe you were really busy and didn't have all the time to review the 2 documents against each other. It did take a little while. But if he did, I have 2 things that I'm really curious about. And this goes for any statements that are made by anybody in this room. First, I wonder how we, as individuals who have been appointed to serve on behalf of our community's library, which is dedicated to sharing knowledge and improving information literacy, can begin to counteract this type of misdirection, this type of misinformation, and begin to use our time and resources for something more productive than fact-checking. I mean, if I were to show up to a village council meeting and say, I'm really concerned about the threat of Sasquatches. I'm disappointed by the village's response to the threat of Bigfoot. There's some animal sightings that are unresolved, and I just made a blanket statement that I was afraid to go out at night because of this. That would be in the public record, right? That would be out there. It would be on the recording. People in the room would have heard me, and they probably would have thought 1 of 2 things. 1, that was a nutcase, fair. Or maybe they would buy into what I was saying, take me at face value, as I try to do when people speak here, and start spreading that information. And maybe their neighbors start listening. In this hypothetical example, I wonder what recourse the village has to sharing that misinformation and how and whether village resources would be spent combating my crazy stories, versus spending their valuable time doing their jobs and providing services to the residents of Downers Grove. For a group of people to show up at our meetings saying they're concerned about the way our library resources are spent, it seems counterintuitive to divert those resources to dispute knowingly false information. And second, I wonder what footing that puts us on when Mr. Briner or his wife or other folks in this room ask us to consider making changes to library policies. If my kid or my employee or my friend came to me and knowingly told me something that wasn't true, I'm not going to be very receptive when they come to me a few weeks later asking for my trust and asking for a privilege that they haven't earned. The same goes for the folks who sit in this room and potentially, theoretically, throw around facts that can easily be proven false and then ask to work together and find solutions, as if they haven't fundamentally disrespected the purpose of this board and the purpose of this library. So I'm going to choose to believe that Mr. Briner does care about the library, because I think you really do. I've spoken with you in person, I've spoken with your wife, I do believe that. Just like I try to take public comments at face value, anyone who comes up here, I try to keep an open mind. But if you present misinformation or falsely imply that the library staff or our board are intentionally causing problems, or have some kind of agenda, or outright call us names for the sake of scoring political points, or getting cool sound bites for the public recording, or owning the other side, I'm going to find it hard to go out of my way to find common ground. But if you have genuine concerns, and you truly care about this library and this community, please come to us and take the time to get curious. Why were there extra calls made to the police from the library? How many of the hundreds of public programs that we offer appeal to you and your family, and not just progressives? Is the information you suspect the library is hiding actually living in plain sight on our website? Do you feel unsafe when you come to the library on a busy Saturday and stand in the children's area? Do you visit the library with the intent of using our wonderful resources and not just finding evidence that we're all terrible people? The library, and not just this one, is changing. It's changing because our world is changing, the people in our communities are changing, and we need different things than we did 130 some years ago when this library was established. We heard about the ways in which our neighbors and community leaders wanted us to change through that strategic planning process. And now the library staff are busy working toward those changes using money that's already included in our budget, which is great news. But of course I know change can be scary. It can feel like a loss of a bygone era, a loss of control, loss of who you think you or your community are. Not all of the changes we're going to see in this library are for us as individuals. I personally don't need an accessible ramp yet. I don't have young children, I'm not food insecure, and I don't need basic job skills training. But I could. And I can recognize that those things may be important and even essential to my fellow Downers Grovers, and that all of these services make our community stronger, thanks to our library.
Since I've been called out, can I comment on that?
No, public comments are over, but you're welcome to submit them via email
Thank
or.
you. Thank you.
Carissa, can I ask a question? Were you able to totally reconcile the two numbers?
There were a couple discrepancies, absolutely.
Pulling out those numbers in a small period of time, I've been commenting on the problems in the library for over a year. We know that there's been people arrested in this library, that there's been drunks in the children's area.
Mr. Briner, public comment is over.
You're just doing a CYA, and you know it.
We've got Trustee Humphries, Trustee Slater, do you have any comments?
Just had a quick comment that I'm not going to get into the land acknowledgement thing because I've not been involved in that from the beginning a couple of years ago. You know, I'm on my learning curve with all of that too. But I did want to address one thing, which was that as a trustee, I actually appreciate when the staff takes initiative on resolving issues, bringing up things, you know, pointing out stuff that needs work. I think that is the staff job. It's a two-way street. There are things we can tell them without micromanaging, And there are things that they can point out to us and say, hey, this came up and we've got a solution, we think you need to take action on it at your meeting. That's what the symbiosis of the board and the staff is supposed to be. And I think we're fortunate to have a staff that doesn't just sit back and twiddle their thumbs and wait for particularly a sometimes divided board to come up with whatever boards come up with in an arduous process.
Couple of comments. First of all, I also participated in a Park District strategic planning focus group. That's something that the Park District is doing in preparation for their strategic planning process, very similar to what we did in our strategic planning process. We invited Park District people over, as well as other members of the community. Park District invited some people from the library board and many other organizations in the community, and I appreciated that and was listened to and appreciated that. Another comment is just on the recent weather, cold weather. I wanted to comment that many people in our communities were suffering immensely because of the sub-zero and sub-zero wind chills. And a number of organizations in the community stepped up and tried to assist people in this. And the library was one of them by providing, as it often does, as it always does actually, as a public library, it provided refuge from the cold weather during the business hours. Other organizations and places in the town did that. And I'm happy that I live in a community where organizations do that. However, it's also cold overnight. And I was very pleased to see that a number of groups in the community banded together, especially two churches, but some other groups, to provide hotel rooms for some of the folks. There was a Giving Tuesday fundraising thing that raised money to help pay for that sometime in the past. This is the second year where that's happened, to allow people to get out of the cold for a while. When the hotel rooms ended and the cold was still continuing last weekend, two churches in Downers Grove provided overnight refuge. Just want to recognize that and again say I'm proud to live in a community that does that sort of thing. The One Book, One Town program you heard about, and I suspect we'll be hearing more about that. And check that out. It's another attempt at organizations banding together to bring the town together for something like that. As far as some of the public comments, I don't like to shoot from the hip. I might have more to say at another time, but I just wanted to comment on a couple of things that I agree that the land acknowledgement is a living document. It was intended to be that. It was not intended to never be changed. Both the board members and some people in the community have asked staff to review certain sections of it, and they've done that. And they did make a change, which did make some recommendations for change. It made me think and do a little more research. And I did find that some of the research and so forth on the subject of this change has changed over time. Didn't change over the last couple of weeks, but we didn't ask the staff to change it just during that period. So I'm glad they did that. They made me think a little bit more. Public comment made me think a little bit more, and I support that change. Not all of the public comments that are made are things that I can agree with, based on my experience both in the community and on the library board. I do listen to those comments, however, and sometimes it makes me go home and do a little more research on certain things. If I disagree with some public comment, please respect that I have a different opinion, but I do listen. I thank especially people who do make constructive suggestions, the specific suggestions on the land acknowledgement. I may or may not agree with them, but we will look into those specific suggestions. The comments on safety in the library. The board and the staff have listened to some of those all of the comments, and there have been some significant changes to the safety protocols in the library and in cooperation with the Downersville Police Department and other peoples. But it's helpful if people make specific suggestions. Yes, there are these police reports, and they're about these subjects. If you have any ideas about what the library can do about these events, I'm sure the staff and the board would like to hear about them, not repeatedly, but tell us what to suggest. Downers Grove doesn't have staffing in the police department to position a police officer in the building full-time. They come when they are called and they do their job. But we cannot stand at the door and ask if someone is coming in, are you going to behave? If they don't behave, we deal with it. If we can't handle it internally, we will call the police. So we hear you on that, and we're working on that. But an awful lot of people in Downers Grove feel that the library is a very good place to bring and send their children based on all of the comments, the positive comments that we have both received as part of the survey we did last year and also the weekly comments that we get.
I actually don't have any comments for tonight, but thank you to all public comments and especially the trustee comments that were very thoughtful. So we will move on to item number 8, Library Director's Report.
The DGPD dispatch log reports that are included in your packet, I want to make it clear that the library has no control over DGPD's use of its business name and address within the dispatch logs. If you do read the dispatch logs, the library's name and or address are frequently used for calls not made by library staff and incidents clearly not occurring in the library, such as parking violations, return of a lost wallet directly to the PD, and an incident that was called in by the First Congregational Church for an incident at the First Congregational Church that is listed on the dispatch log as the library, and the address is listed as the library. And yet, when you look at that actual incident report, which is included in your packet as well, it clearly states that it was First Congregational Church. So it is impossible for the library to track calls made to DGPD by non-staff unless notified by the caller and or emergency services when the responders do not enter the library. For example, there was one incident report that is in your packet that a police officer doing a patrol outside saw someone drinking alcohol and cited them. It did not occur in the library. No library staff were involved. How? We cannot be everywhere in this, on the grounds, 24 hours a day, and some of these occur in the parking lot. It's impossible for the library to do that. And it is disingenuous to imply that all of these incidents can and should be handled by library staff.
So what is the reason behind the discrepancy in the numbers, if there is still a remaining discrepancy?
We don't know. It was a call not made by library staff members, that does not have an incident report attached to it. So there is no further information available from the PD, but it is obvious that the police department is using the library as business name and location.
Just to clarify, I know you looked at the data closely, and a lot of these were outside the library's jurisdiction or outside the library premises, but there was a remaining discrepancy, right?
And you also didn't have any further information in the police information that we received. So again, if the library staff didn't, if if it's not in the library log of security incident reports, the library didn't have knowledge of it. So that's the discrepancy.
If we didn't call, no one who was in the library called and let us know that they called, and there was no further action by DGPD, we have no further information about that call.
So are there incidents that happen in the library that are not captured by the incident reports, but that result in the police responding to things going on inside the library?
No.
I don't understand the gap then.
No, not normally. If a patron calls 911
Yeah.
about an incident and no police officer responds to the library, it goes on the police records, but we don't know about it at
So
the
we
library.
think these are patron calls that aren't captured by the incident reports?
I
Yes.
think the discrepancy might be, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you do for example, if you do a FOIA request to the police department about calls to the library, they dig through their reports and generate a list of all the things that mention the library. And that includes.
Well, I know, we've been through that though.
Yeah,
I know there are some
but
that
if you
aren't
submit
part of
that
the library.
similar report, that similar request to the library, we deliver a list of things that our staff has reported. Those two lists are not going to be the same.
Can I
They'll overlap.
give a hypothetical
Sure.
example? If a person calls the PD about suspicious activity that they think they saw outside the library, and they meet the police officers in the parking lot, and never say anything to library staff about it. They just go and meet the police, and the police don't make an incident report of that call, then all we have is what is in this dispatch log. The library's business name and address, the fact that a call was made, it says suspicious is for a lot of these, and then nothing, there is no further information. I don't know how I am supposed to find further information that is not publicly available and information that is not things that my staff are party to.
No, I understand that, and your hypothetical falls in that group that weren't on library premises, so I'm not talking about those.
But
But
actually,
what I'm wondering is are there things that we're missing on things that are happening in the library premises that aren't captured by our safety monitors and our incident report? Because it sounds like there are.
No, so the example that you just gave of, and the ones that are actually in the report that we got, that was FOIA that we got from the police department, it actually, when they're like a traffic violation, or if it's someone like the lost wallet example, those are that you can see in the report. It actually says what it is, and so it's like, oh, that's that one, even if there's not a library.
So these are like
They literally
unspecified.
It literally says suspicious. Like, I don't remember what page is one. I don't know. You're right. It's very long.
It's in the.
It's They say it says suspicious, and then it says a date and time, but there's no, because it wasn't
No
serious
police
enough, or there
report.
was no like follow-up action. There's no further notes in the police report. So I think the only way to find out what that gap would be is have the police tell us, because we don't know.
Dave, you said we're working on some stuff. What are we working on?
Well, we've installed new cameras, we've hired building monitors.
Oh, okay. So
We've
it's
done,
already in place.
we've done things like that to address some of the issues that have been raised.
We've
That's what I was referring to. The issue you just raised, though, just a quick comment on that. You say if an incident happens in the library and neither staff nor police notice it. Did I understand you to say?
No, the police would notice it, I guess, if they're.
Well, they weren't
police
here.
logs.
They aren't here, so they don't. I think it,
Well, if the
policeman
yeah,
happens
a tree
to-
falls in the woods.
When
Yeah.
police are in the
If the
building,
police-
staff make an incident report.
Okay.
if staff sees it, and we get these almost every day or every week in our
No,
email,
I get them, don't worry.
if something happens, the staff log it.
Okay.
And if the same thing happens too many times,
That was my
then
question. If is there a gap in our incident reporting where there is a police response and it's not captured?
I'm not aware of that.
It sounds like the
Not in the
discrepancy
building.
remaining was because of unspecified details.
Yeah, and the example that Julie provided, I mean, if they were in the building, it would be logged as a police.
And I asked you the question about what we're working on because I'm not aware of any current things that we're working on. We've had numerous conversations about whether it's appropriate to have uniformed security guards in the library and to include that in the budget. That we've not taken action to do, but for many reasons, some good.
Well,
But we're not working, there's nothing in progress right now.
Yes, there is. If you read your 2024 work plan tracker, which is available on dglibrary.org/transparency, that is the work plan for our strategic plan.
Yes.
And there are a number of things that address safety and security, and that shows you where the action steps are and the timeline for their completion.
Have any of those started?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we are doing a new round of security cameras, reevaluating the possibility for additional security cameras. Now that we have upgraded our security camera system, we have the capability for additional security cameras that we did not have before that upgrade. We have also been looking at some access control for within the building.
Hopefully that's helpful for members of the community to know what's currently in progress, so they are
And
aware of that.
just in
There are
case,
improvements.
I'm sorry, just in case you don't know, we do have a building operations
Director.
monitor,
Yep.
BOM, on duty anytime the library is open. And if an incident occurs that a staff member observes, whether it's a medical emergency, whether it's somebody misbehaving or something in between those things, they contact the building operation monitor, and the monitor checks it out. And every time the monitor checks out something like that, they log it in the system, and everybody gets notified of it. If there is an update later to that report, we're notified again. And the board members receive copies of those. So that's one thing that was done in the past year to try to keep track of what's going on in the library, because there were people who said there are things going on in the library that you don't know about, and so we're trying to address that. That's kind of what I meant when I said.
I do think there's an over-index on monitoring and there's not a lot tangible on prevention.
Well,
I'm not sure what you mean.
I'd welcome
Can
any
you explain what that
suggestions
means?
on that.
Cameras and building monitors are all monitoring mechanisms, right?
Well, they
Well, I mean, some of the-
intervene, they intercede.
Yeah, I mean, I guess some of the incidents reports that we get we get incident reports as we're discussing, and often there are things like, an incident report pops up in my email, but it's a child's finger got caught in a door. I mean, there's a lot of times the incidents are just things that happen. Someone trips, there's a lot of those. But a lot of the ones that are, I mean, there were several that were like teens misbehaving. And I don't know how we stop teens from coming into the library. I mean, they're teenagers, so I'm not sure what.
Definitely don't think we should stop them from coming.
Right, so that's my point. So I think a lot of it's really difficult to know what are,
Well, the monitors
the people are already in the building who are some of these incidents, I don't know, can't stop them from coming in, so I don't.
From a prevention standpoint, there is, bans, and
Right.
those are all well documented
Right.
in the system.
And our monitors also communicate internally with each other about, if there is someone that they're concerned about, someone whose behavior is kind of skirting the line of our code of conduct. They are in communication with one another and other staff members, keep an eye on this person, that sort of thing.
Or if a patron reports
Or if a
something,
patron
it's-
reports something, if a patron reports it, it's automatically into an incident report. But, just when someone's behavior is skirting the line of our code of conduct, we don't just kick them out. That's why we have our code of conduct. That's what the rules are for. It is a public library, a public building. That means that we're open to everyone. When those doors unlock in the morning, anybody can walk in. And they do. And they do things that you would not expect. Having seen someone bring a toaster oven and plug it in and start cooking a pizza, I cannot make a rule for that. So, we're doing our best to be as proactive as we can, while also reminding ourselves that we are a public library that is open to everyone. And everyone is sometimes a lot of folks.
I want to,
But
I'm sorry, I just also wanted to jump in and say, I personally don't want to see policemen marching back and forth all day long at the library. That's not a comforting look for anybody. And I think in terms of, again, prevention, the library staff have done a phenomenal job. And I know we saw recently a list of online trainings that they've received. And I think, Jen, you just recently did a de-escalation, something that was in your report. So there are other methods to ensuring the safety and security of and pleasant environment of the library. And I think the library has been doing that. I don't think it should be like a military presence isn't necessary. And I so I applaud the library in taking those extra steps because that's really what makes this a welcoming environment.
I'm not sure if that was in response to my comment, but I didn't suggest the military or police presence. I suggested uniformed security, which I think is very common in public places in many cases.
I think that's something we should talk about.
Yeah.
And it is in the plan.
It's worth discussing.
It is in the plan to talk about it. There are consequences to misbehavior, however. I mean, it is a public library and we welcome everybody, but there is a code of conduct which is published and posted around the building. If people don't follow that, the word respect appears in it a few times. Respect for themselves, respect for staff, respect to other patrons and that sort of thing. If a person violates that, one of the building monitors will intervene and will suggest that they not do that. If they continue to do it, they may be asked to leave for the day. That's a consequence. If they return, or if it's more serious, or if it continues over a period of time, a person can be banned from the library for a period of time, a day, a week, a month, a year. And when I say we, the staff does enforce that. And so there are consequences, and I think the staff has made some significant improvements in that area over the past year. But if not, keep telling us.
And if an individual is banned from the library and returns, then we do call the police, and you can follow that in some of those incident reports, to serve them trespass, and they are cited for trespass for returning to the library. So that is one of the times that the library calls the police. Wellness checks are always number one. For some reason, we seem to have to do a lot of those. And the next seems to be for trespass for people who either are returning when they have been banned from the library or refuse to leave when asked by staff. So take that all. The only other thing I'm going to say tonight is just for everyone to take a look at the new statistical reports in the board packet. They do include the new reports that are available through our incident tracker, and so we are including those in every month's board packet now. And in the new statistical reports, don't miss the highlights section at the top of each month's statistical report. It includes some really great statistics, such as our over 1 million circs, our 18% increase in attendance at the library, and also I just need to highlight in the Children's Services report that we had year over year from 2022 to 2023, we had over 15,000 more kids attend programs at the library in 2023, which I think is pretty amazing. So I stand And look for our annual report coming out in your next issue of Discoveries. That's all I have for tonight.
All right, thank you very much, Julie. Item number 9 is new business. A is March 22nd, 2024, in-service day closing.
We are planning to do a full day of training for the staff. We generally do this once a year, every year. And so this year we have selected March 22nd, so we would like to add that to our closings. And we close to the public on that day to allow all staff to attend the training.
I'll move to approve the closing of the library to the public on March 22nd for staff in-service day.
I will second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the in-service day closing on March 22nd, 2024. Do we have any questions or comments regarding this closing? All right, we will proceed with a voice vote. All those in favor of approving the March 22nd, 2024 in-service day closing, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And all those abstaining? All right, the library will be closed on March 22nd for the in-service. Item letter B, Libraries Illinois Risk Agency, aka LIRA, insurance renewal.
All right, this is the library's policy that includes building, liability, property, boiler and machinery, all of the library building things, as well as all of our liability. Our coverages are very robust. This is a pool that is tailored to the needs of public libraries specifically, and it does include cyber liability, crisis response, and volunteers. The blended increase is 13.25%. They had warned us, our brokerage firm had warned us to budget for 20% for the renewal this year. They felt that the hardening insurance market, particularly on the property side, due to all of the severe weather events that have caused significant property damage throughout the Midwest, would result in a higher renewal. So this is well within our budgeted amount.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the LIRA insurance renewal. Do we have any comments or questions? All right, let's go ahead and proceed with a roll call vote for this one.
Okay. Trustee Doherty?
Yes.
Trustee Humphries?
Yes.
Trustee Kuntia?
Yes.
Trustee Nienberg?
Yes.
Trustee Sladak?
Yes.
President Gagano?
Yes. Thank you, Caitlin. The LIRA insurance renewal has been approved. Item C, Biblioteca Annual Service and Maintenance Agreement renewal.
This is the service and maintenance agreement for our automated materials handler, which is also known as the sorter. And it also includes all of the self-check units, all of the RFID pads that are at each public service checkout station, also within our access services department. So it is quite a bit of equipment. Also the software that powers all of that equipment, plus all of the ongoing upgrades of those softwares, and a biennial tune-up of the sorter itself. And it does include parts and maintenance. One of the most significant things that we get by having a service and maintenance agreement is priority scheduling when our sorter does go down, and that is very important to us. Some of you may remember earlier in the year when our sorter went down for more than 4 days, and this room was completely full of books waiting to be processed, because that's how far behind we get when the sorter is out, and that was with priority scheduling. Our sorter is coming to the end of its useful life. They are no longer making parts for our sorter. And so they are having to basically scavenge parts from old ones. So we are actively looking at our options as far as replacement. So we do believe that this is a very high priority item for us to have a maintenance agreement for this sorter until it is replaced. This represents, the contract is a 4.3% increase over the prior year.
Comment? Or you want a motion on the floor first?
Sure, yeah.
Well, I'll move it, and I have a comment.
Okay. I'll second, so you can make your comment.
All right, a motion and a second. Go ahead.
Just a comment. I remember when we got that sorter the first time and started installing self-check-in units, check-out units rather. There was a little skepticism at first, but they very rapidly became very popular. We still offer the option, and it's one that I really like, of seeing a real person to check your books out. But if people would rather do it themselves, you put the stack of books on the machine, and it checks them out for you. And that's a very popular amenity. The sorter, I think if we ever get short on funds, we should sell tickets for people to look through the window and watch the sorter. It's a very popular thing. Even I enjoy looking at that. So it's not free, but it's very helpful, and it allows us to get books back on the shelf so you guys can find them sometimes the same day.
Yes. And we just the other day had a Girl Scout troop come in and have a tour of and learn about the sorter and learned about the robot in the library and how it helps us. And that's always a very popular program for our little Scout troops.
All right, any other comments or questions?
We just had an assumption that this is not something where if you send out an RFP, you're going to get 27 responses back.
You'll get one response.
You know, highly specialized
Yes.
services.
And the 4.3% increase is surprisingly low considering the inflation rates the last couple of years.
All right, let's go ahead and proceed with a roll call.
Okay. Trustee Doherty? Yes. Trustee Humphries?
Yes.
Trustee Kuntia?
Yes.
Trustee Nienberg?
Yes.
Trustee Sladak?
Yes.
President Gagano?
Yes. All right, and letter D is the land acknowledgement statement update.
All right. I just, to kind of speak to Bill's earlier point, I do want to let you know that we did not know that this was going to be coming. The staff actually began a process following the November meeting of reviewing the FAQ. We called Dr. Lowe and asked for his help to help us update the FAQ answers and add questions that had been asked in recent meetings. So we were trying to make sure that our FAQ was actually updated and being responsive to the questions that were being asked. Within that process, we found that the data had been amended multiple times since its release. So when staff looked at it back in July and submitted the update in August, they were looking at a specific set of data that had since been amended. And in those current data sets no longer show denominations breakdowns as they had when the statement was reviewed earlier in the summer. So in taking that as this is a living document, as we had said, and so in the review of the FAQ, the staff determined that they wanted to bring this change forward to the board in response to the information that they were finding in the living document through their research. And so this recommendation was brought to you all. Swapna and I, when she was setting the agenda, Swapna had actually asked that this go after Bill's motion. However, because it is new business and his motion had been on the November agenda and is thus unfinished business, this appropriately is supposed to go in the new business section of the agenda, which precedes unfinished business.
That doesn't explain why it's got a recommended action of approval versus review first reading.
We don't generally do first readings.
We actually talked about that as something we wanted to start doing and having more discipline around when something like this should be submitted into the public domain so the public can digest it, the public can comment on it, and it not be is submitted and voted on in the same meeting. We've had that conversation.
But the packet comes out, right, the packet is public.
It doesn't matter.
Yes.
The packet comes out 3 days before the meeting. The conversation that I know we all had was that we wanted to do a better job of being more disciplined about putting stuff into the public domain so that they can be reviewed and heard, digested, and then commented on.
In the end, the action is up to us.
Yeah.
Right? So
True.
it's a recommended action.
So question about the timeline. So none of this data was updated and available in the August revision, but it suddenly became updated and available for November exercise?
I don't think that the staff necessarily reviews every reference item every time they look at it. They were asked to look at this particular one last fall, and
The explanation.
so they looked at.
The staff did the review over the summer, and that recommendation was made at the August board meeting. That data was current at that time. Following the November board meeting, the staff went into looking at updating the FAQs as well as our resource and more information links, and worked with Dr. Lowe on that. And that is when they discovered that the reference that they had used back in the summer had been updated, and that the current data set was different. And so, because this is a living document, they are making the recommendation to change it.
That's a massive change. Was there any explanation on why it changed so drastically?
That you would have to direct toward the organization that posted that data.
So we just take that data. We don't look into the change in the data.
We trust our
Pass it along.
reputable sources.
That's
I
why
thought that it
Brian
was researched.
I could make a comment that I said earlier that some questions, discussions on this topic came up, and I initially, based on some of the reference material, supported the statement as it was, but since that time I've done a little more personal research on it and found that some things had been changed, and found that, for example, my own church was one of the churches that participated in the boarding schools, along with the Catholic Church and many other churches, several other churches, and rather than naming them all, I think the decision was rightly made.
Why did staff choose to initiate this process when there was a motion on the table that would have been more inclusive and involved other members of the community, other stakeholders, and been more collaborative and consensus building? Why was this undertaken knowing that that motion was out there?
As I stated before, this process was undertaken as an update to the FAQ section and the resource links. Working with Dr. Lowe, what they found led them to make a recommendation to correct the statement.
The FAQ section that's part of the extended document, right?
The FAQ and the resource links are not part of the extended version of the, if you go back, of the land acknowledgement. If you go and look, the board-approved sections are the land acknowledgement, the short version, and the extended land acknowledgement, the long version. The FAQs were done by staff to support those documents. And if you go back and look, they were not included as a board-approved document to allow the staff to update the FAQs as needed and to update the resources and links cited as needed, which was the process that we were undertaking in November. Dr. Lowe was able to give us some time between his 2 semesters as a professor of Native American Studies at Ohio State University.
It seems extremely disingenuous to have FAQs that address certain portions of the board-approved land acknowledgement statement and extended version that wade into the controversy that's embedded in some of those statements that we have been discussing. It seems like a pretty blatant workaround if the staff has the liberty to make FAQs that wade into the same topics that are part of the extended statement and take positions on those. So maybe the FAQs should be part of the board-approved document if the staff is going to go off on their own and make statements and take positions in the FAQs.
I think I'm struggling a little bit with the accusation that our staff aren't experts in their field. They are experts. I mean, they are the library staff.
Well, they can't even answer why the data changed.
Because data always changes. There's information that is always new. There's information that we are always learning. There's always new cancer research. There's always, I mean, that's how information works.
Right. I think most cancer research is when the data changes significantly, they know why.
Bill, you referenced the change in the data for the Catholic boarding schools, the mass grave situation that was originally presented one way and further investigation changed what the researchers were putting forth.
It wasn't researchers. It was a Native American troop that had seismic data and they leapt to a conclusion that were mass graves. It wasn't research.
Which has now been corrected.
After 63 churches were burned, Marty.
I understand that.
Yeah.
That's okay. I think we don't need to approach this that adapting these adjustments to the land acknowledgement tonight closes the book on your motion or on any further work on the document. This is not mutually exclusive processes. I think, the work that's been done may or may not be enough. It may hold up, it may not, as more dissertations. I'm sure there are hundreds of doctoral students working on all of this at every university, particularly people like Dr. Lowe. So, we can do this a step at a time.
Given that there was an active motion before the board, how come there was no communication that this was being undertaken?
That a recommendation would come
That
forward.
people were working on revisions to the acknowledgement statement.
I was under the impression that there were ongoing and regular.
We regularly, that
It's a
is
living
why it is
Reassessments
stated to
of it.
be a
It was a
living
living
document.
document. It was passed as a living document, and I just assumed that periodically they would come to us with suggested changes.
Yeah, I understand that, but knowing there was a motion before the board that dealt with this specific issue, you don't think it's appropriate, Dave, that there was communication, that there was a revision in the works?
I don't think it was necessary. I think whether it was appropriate or not, that's.
Well,
I'm
we've
not
had
sure I can make that
conversations
judgment.
about board relations and board communication. So in context of that, do you think this is okay?
The library,
Okay.
the library staff was trying to be responsive to the questions being asked at board meetings.
The shift, though, was that the library staff decided to be responsive after the motion was put forth, but had not been responsive in I believe the first time this came up was February. Was not responsive in the months between February and November, which I think is notable.
Do we know that?
Marty, you said you appreciate when the staff takes initiative. Would you appreciate when
We
the staff
don't
takes
know that.
initiative?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Would you appreciate when the staff takes initiative that's directly opposed to a motion that you had made?
It's up for discussion. I don't think it is opposed. I don't see this as being opposed.
No, the motion that I made was moving to have a collaborative process.
I understand.
To build consensus, not to have staff go off again and make their own changes.
But those changes have been in progress since this
Since
document
November.
was first passed.
Right. And this particular change happened concurrent with a motion
I
That
just
would
don't-
change the direction of how this is maintained.
It doesn't concern me.
I think we may just have to have a difference of opinion on that subject between us, but I know that when we voted to approve and then later update the land acknowledgement, we had a discussion that said this is a living document and there will be ongoing studies and research and staff. I mean, in fact, we asked staff to, like we asked them to monitor lots of things that the board approves and bring us suggestions when they think they should be changed. And I think we can do that with, and it's sort of a separate thing from
It's a
a motion,
remarkable
from a
timing
motion
coincidence.
which is also to review the entire document.
So I'm confused. Clarification on the motion. Is the motion to include approving the FAQ changes?
The FAQs were included as an FYI to show some of the work that we had been doing.
That wasn't clear in the motion. It appears that the request that's before us is to approve the changes and the introduction to the motion talks about the 4 added FAQs. Is that not part of what we're being asked to approve?
It is not part of what you are
Could
being
you
asked
please
to
speak
approve.
up?
The FAQs are not part of what the board is being asked to approve. The recommendation from staff was specifically, and I'm sorry, but I'm not on the right page here. The motion, the staff recommendation was to update the extended version of the land acknowledgement statement. And that is, the FAQs are appended to that. As you know, we often append additional information. For example, on the personnel policy update, we have appended the library wage and benefit survey that was used to do comparisons that led to some of the changes within the personnel policy. So very often, additional supporting documentation is included in your packet. But the recommendation very clearly states that the board is the recommended action, and this is what the staff is recommending, to approve the update to the extended version of the land acknowledgement.
I think
So we're not approving
The FAQs.
the FAQs.
And I think there was, I think you mentioned it was at the July meeting when there was another change that we talked about at our meeting. So there was work, in fact, done between the concerns that were brought up in February, I think you said it was, and November, which is this last kind of round. So it wasn't, it wasn't, I see what you're saying about like the timing, but there was another time this year when they were being responsive to other conversations that were happening.
Okay, there was a change that was made in August. I would take issue with the fact that it was responsive to the concerns that were raised. All it did was double down on the statements that people were concerned about and add citations to it, right? That was the change that came through in August.
And so, in fact, this change does, based on other facts that have come to light,
Yes,
then kind of reverse what that's saying. So there's an update based on new information.
So sorry, but I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I'm just saying it was based. The change here is in fact based on updated information that the library staff came across in their working through the FAQs. So Bill, I wonder. So if we take what Julie said at face value, like okay, the staff went in, they were looking at the FAQs and they were updating some of that, and they came across updated information. What would you have had them do instead of this? I guess I'm curious about like what.
Yeah, we've had many conversations about communication, right? And I think at that point, knowing that this was on the table, knowing that this issue was in the spotlight, and it was of concern to members of the community, that communication should have happened almost immediately. Not have a 2-month lapse or a revised, this feels just like the strategic planning process. right? Staff learns something, goes off on their own, makes changes, and brings back a finished document, and doesn't open for involvement and participation by a broader set of stakeholders. And I do think it is perfectly fair game to talk about the FAQs, and I wonder if they should be part of what the board has to improve, especially when one of the new FAQs undermines the change in the extended document. I talked about it before, but when you remove the statement about Catholic churches and then add an FAQ that cites the Catholic Truth and Healing organization, that to me makes the former.
We cite the two organizations that are doing the primary research on this, and that includes the Catholic Truth and Healing.
Okay, so I went to the Catholic Truth and Healing's website. It's a remarkably thin website. It has one issue that they seem to research and highlight, and it's just the boarding school issue. How did we derive that these two sources as the two sources of the two organizations we would reference in the FAQs, and what other sources were considered and excluded?
There is one of the FAQs refers to how our staff selects their sources.
Yes, right. And there is no transparency or no involvement or no openness about how that process plays out for a document that has been of significant concern and occupied a lot of discussion in this board and in these board meetings over the past year. So my point is that this process is broken. It is not inclusive. It is staff going off and doing something that doesn't involve other stakeholders and bringing back a finished product for us to understand.
And if enough of us feel that way, then we won't vote for it.
I can't accept the language, the staff goes off on their own. We hire the staff to go off on their own.
Who else participated, Dave?
And we instructed the staff to do that.
Again, I think
We didn't tell them how to do it, we didn't tell them specific what to do, but we hire a professional staff to run the library. We're not professionals in the library. We asked them to do it. They didn't install it. They made a recommendation to us, and we'll vote to approve it or not.
Please bring the items you wish to check out
Dave, I
to
think
the
that is
self-checks
a
or the first
staggering
floor service desk at this time.
way to
Again,
ignore
the
the
library
context
will be
around the
closing in
situation.
15 minutes.
The
Thank
motion
you.
was specific to creating a more inclusive, broader set of stakeholders to participate in this process.
Your motion was to do that,
Yes,
I agree.
right.
Which will still come up later.
And that'll come up, and we'll vote on it. We'll talk about it, we'll vote on it.
So for this to run parallel to that without resolving this, with no communication and no sensitivity to the fact that this issue was before this board and of concern to this community, I think is extremely
Well,
disingenuous.
as I say, we'll have to agree to disagree on that one.
Yes, we will.
Okay.
Well, I suppose the best thing to do now is see if there is a motion to approve this updated land acknowledgement as presented.
Motion to table.
All right, we have a motion to table. Do we have a second? All right, that motion did not receive a second.
Do we have a motion on the table? On the
No,
floor?
we do not.
We do not. I will move that we accept the motion as presented.
All
I
right.
don't remember the language of it, but
I will second. Oh, Marty and I'll also second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the presented land acknowledgement statement update. All those, we'll go ahead and do a voice vote. All those that would like to approve this, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, please say nay.
Nay.
And all those abstaining. All right, The land acknowledgement statement update has been approved and passed. Moving on to item number 10, unfinished business. Item A is personnel policy update.
The personnel policy was presented at the November board meeting and has since been reviewed by the library attorney, Kleinthorpe and Jenkins, with they have made some changes. There was one additional new section that was responsive to a change in the law, and there are also proposed changes in the vacation and holiday sections that will impact the typical underspend of the wage and salary budget lines. The staffing levels for public service desks will remain within the ideal staffing levels, and the budgetary impact of the tuition reimbursement would be a potential line item for 2025. It would go unfunded for the balance of 2024.
Regarding the tuition reimbursement, I know that there's an August 1st deadline to submit for that.
Yes.
Will board be kind of updated as
Yes.
to kind of where we're at?
So the way this policy, the way we envision this policy taking effect is that following its approval, then this coming August 1st would be the first deadline for staff to submit for possible reimbursement in the upcoming budget year. So we would be asking staff to submit those reimbursements for 2025 within our budget process for the 2025 fiscal year.
Would you like a motion on the floor so we can discuss it?
Yes, please.
I move that we accept the personnel policy changes as presented.
I'll second. We have a motion and a second to approve the personnel policy updates as presented. We'll go ahead and open the floor for comment.
My comment will be kind of brief on this. I'm not a personnel person. I read through the whole thing, believe it or not. And it makes sense to me. I do not feel totally qualified to approve the detail level personnel policies of a large organization. However, people who do have that expertise, including our attorneys who specialize in library personnel, and they have edited it and approved it, and therefore I support the change.
I do have a background in this, and there's nothing in here that's glaring to me, but I would ask our library director if there's anything that was changed by the law firm that gives you any pause or concern.
No, none at all.
Okay.
Do you have any sense of what the tuition reimbursement order of magnitude would be?
I would guess that we will probably get it. I would guess we'll get at least 2, maybe 3 requests for reimbursement. It all depends. We have a number of, it's very difficult to gauge how many staff who otherwise were not seeking additional certification or degrees will do so or plan to do so if there's a potential for tuition reimbursement. But I would guess somewhere in the 2 to 3 request range.
But what's the dollar amount roughly?
It depends on whether they're requesting for the library technical assistant certification, which is a community college course that has the lower reimbursement rate, or the master's degree that comes at the higher rate. Also, there is the difference in the fees of the different schools. Dominican University has the closest actual master's degree program that happens live that can be significantly more expensive than, say, the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana that has an online option that is somewhat less expensive. So it depends on who asks for which program. And that's why we have built in the requests to occur during the budget process so that we can budget appropriately for what folks are anticipating for the upcoming fiscal year.
Comment?
Yeah, go.
Yeah, every organization that I've ever worked for has had a tuition reimbursement program. And I think we're late to the party a little bit on this. Maybe the library world is late to the party on this, but it is an amazing way to attract and retain good employees. The way I read this, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's impossible to budget for it, as she said, because you don't know how many people are going to apply for it. However, there is a $5,000 per person calendar year maximum and a $10,000 per person lifetime maximum. And so, looking at our employees and talking about it, I think the estimate is 2 or 3 a year is both doable and reasonable.
I agree.
And I said that to prove that I read it.
We believed you anyway,
It's a
Dave.
very dry read, but. All right, any other comments? All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve the personnel policy update. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And all those abstaining? All right, personnel policy update has been approved. All right, item B, motion to rewrite the DGPL land acknowledgement.
Point of order, is that motion still on the table, or does it need to be resubmitted?
It was never moved.
It was done,
Just
yeah,
proposed
so
for first reading.
would you restate it?
Let me just clarify, the motion came in after, was placed on the agenda after the deadline for action items for the November meeting. It was submitted late after the agenda had been posted, so we added it as a discussion-only item in November because it would not have met the 48-hour required posting for an action
I'll make
item.
a further clarification. It was never my intent
And
for it
have
to
your
be voted
attention,
on in
please.
November.
Yeah.
The library will be closing in 5 minutes. Please bring
So
the
there was
items you
never
wish to
a
check
motion
out
made.
to
It
the
was just
self-checks
submitted for
or the
first
first
reading.
floor service desk at this time.
And it's in the
Again,
packet
the
on
library will be
the last
closing
page.
in 5 minutes. Thank you.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sorry, I said, well, how much?
It's in the packet on the last
It's in the
page.
packet on the last page. I never made a motion. It was just submitted in the November meeting for first reading.
Thank you.
To clarify, we don't have a practice of having first readings in this group. We could do it, we can make that change. And no reason why we can't, maybe we should, but.
Well,
That
but-
would be a bylaws
We've talked about
change,
that.
so.
But the
yeah.
tradition is not to do that. The tradition is to talk about stuff
Yeah.
in board meetings and open meetings. When it narrows down to a motionable thing, then it appears on an agenda and we either vote on it at that meeting or we decide to wait and not vote on it. That's been the tradition, but that's a first reading is when a new idea is in almost motionable form, but it is presented with the understanding that it will not be voted at that meeting, but voted on at a subsequent meeting. The Downers Grove Village Council does that, but they meet 3 times a month.
Yeah.
We only meet once a month.
And they have different statutory considerations on how they have to do their
And
readings too.
it would, in many cases, it would prolong the implementation of a new project if we had a practice or a requirement of first, second reading and then vote. It could take an extra 2 or 3 months or something. But Not necessarily, you can always bypass that process. So just to clarify what first reading is.
Right, and trustees do have the option to table, which we have done before, if we feel that.
So is the motion on the table?
There's no
right
motion
now?
on the table. I will move to approve the motion to rewrite the DGPL land acknowledgement statement as presented.
I'll second it because I believe it deserves some discussion.
Thanks.
So we have a motion and a second to rewrite the DGPL land acknowledgement statement. Go ahead and open the floor for comments or questions.
I'd like to hear a little more about what you as the proposer of this have in mind in terms of the makeup of this committee. How would you go about
Yeah, sure.
getting the people involved in it? Who's going to be on it? How do
Yeah,
you
so
see it playing out?
point number 2 on the motion addresses that, maybe not the mechanics of it, but addresses the makeup. It says the Board of Trustees shall charter a subcommittee of local residents with Native American lineage, library staff, 1 or 2 members of the board to develop a new statement that addresses the offenses and deficiencies in the current statement. So I have a missing hand in there. The committee shall be made up of no more than 7 members, shall have access to library resources, additional Native American representatives and sources, and past material that was referenced in development of the current statement. I think that's all that has to do with the makeup of the committee and how the committee shall conduct their business.
And how does that differ from the process initially that, I'm asking because I haven't watched every meeting from the last 3 years.
Yeah, I wasn't there either. But I think regardless of how it was originally formed, I think there's sufficient interest in this and sufficient concern. And I think it's from a standpoint of, irrespective of our traditions, I think collaboration and consensus on this kind of a statement by the broader set of stakeholders in the communities, inclusive of experts, results in a product that we can all be behind and supportive of.
And it turned our resident historian here.
I do not accept that title.
Okay, I'm going to turn
My
to Trustee
mind
Humphreys.
My mind is congested with useless information, but it's not rather thoroughly organized like a historian would.
Well,
As far as the
I'm
mechanics
going
are-
to, maybe Julie's the one to address it, but since I was not on the board when this process started, and my impression is that there was a fairly broad input into it from the offset. So I'm just trying to figure out
There was not.
what this does that the initial process didn't do.
I mean, it was, to the extent that it was brought to the board, that was an opportunity, but the development of the statement was not a broadly inclusive process.
It was.
You mean 2 years ago?
Yeah. They engaged, from what I've read in the meetings that I watched, they engaged the Native American resources, Dr. Lowe and one other. The staff had resources that had been identified through the ALA and the ILA. They utilized those resources, and it was developed through that process.
My recollection, and I'm not the historian as I just said, but is that there was interest in the development of a land acknowledgement statement brought to us from the public and also from certain board members, some board members. And the staff was asked to look into this and research and to find other land acknowledgement statements and to do what librarians do, to do research and put together a statement that we could discuss, that we could consider. And that was presented to us and we passed it.
And I can speak.
We discussed it and modified it and passed it.
I can speak to the original process. It was our equity advisory team, which has staff members, a trustee, and 2 community members who participate on it, who worked with the other staff and Dr. John N. Lowe, professor of Native American Studies at Ohio State University, and Joseph Standing Bear Schranz, who is the founder and president of the Midwest Soaring Foundation, which is located in Lockport, but currently developing their new site in Glen Ellen. And we worked with both of those individuals, who are also both enrolled members of 2 different tribes. And they are both, I'm sorry, I don't remember them off the top of my head, but both are listed in the packet. And we worked with those individuals to develop the original land acknowledgement statement that went before the board in August of 2021.
There was a trustee and there were community
Yes.
members on the initial task force on
Yes.
all of River
And-
That's not,
and-
my investigation into how this was created, the statement that precedes the revised statement was that, even if the equity advisory team was in place at that point, that they were not significantly involved in this. This was primarily staff working with the 2 Native American scholars, which may have been a good decision at the time. My motion is not to go back and re-legislate that part of this. My question to the board is, what is the harm in involving, knowing that this has risen to a level of concern and interest in the community, why would we not want to involve a broader set of stakeholders and get to a place where there's a statement that is actually supported by a broad group of stakeholders?
So the challenge I have with the motion, the way you're framing it, is the idea that what we're presenting for the land acknowledgement shouldn't be offensive. And one of the conversations that we had when the board was discussing and approving the original statement was around the oft-mentioned phrase genocide. And that how that at that time, there were a couple of board members who were, I was going to point you, but I overly point at Dave tonight, that were concerned about the use of that term and felt, not offended, maybe is not the right word, but discomforted by that term. But through discussions with our group and understanding kind of where the equity team was coming from, that it's not about our comfort. It's not about me feeling okay about forced displacement of Native American tribes. It's about sharing factual information about what happened here. And so I don't know if creating a statement that's not offensive is in fact the goal.
So
and I think offensive is maybe not.
Well, I think one of the equity diversity goals in general, not in this, is to present the viewpoint of people whose viewpoints are not normally represented.
So just to clarify, because the word offenses and deficiencies are in the motion, and that was specific to the statements about the Catholic Church, which I think now we can conclusively say that those were deficient factually and were offensive objectively to people who were raising the issue, right? The matter of genocide, I hope we can all agree that there's some subjectivity to that. And there are valid points of view on whether that's a term that should be applied. There's no final decision on the fact that the historical events qualify as genocide. And I think the community gets the right to weigh in on that.
Can I just say something? One, Chris, I wanted to thank you for saying what you said, because I think the word consensus is also kind of odd, because I don't think a statement like this will ever get full consensus for everyone. But I also, being a board member then, when we were, we didn't have anyone come to our board meetings and say anything. And people were really happy. In fact, when we did a ceremony, invited the Midwest Soaring Foundation to perform, poems were read, there was an official part.
The entire statement was read.
The entire statement from beginning to end was read by Dave. We had a huge crowd in Official Park. And so there was community support. So there were things that Mrs. Briner brought up, the language of unceded and ceded, I wrote that down because I think that's something that we should talk about. There's, I understand that changes are going to be made. Maybe we need to figure out a way to acknowledge Indigenous peoples who are doing incredible things in the world right now. I see that a lot with Asian Pacific Heritage Month. Sometimes we only talk about certain people and not some of the successes our community has had in this country. I agree with a lot of that, but I want you to know that this process, because I was part of it, we were involved. There was a lot of conversations that we were having.
You were a board member.
Well, when it was brought to the board, we spent a
Input.
very long time discussing the language.
At the board
Someone
meetings.
posted
At
this,
the board meetings, right?
the land acknowledgement on Nextdoor last week. I happened to see it, and I was following the conversation. There were over 90 comments on it, and they were all in support.
As are our letters that we're getting, right? We
Yeah.
received several letters this week.
But obviously, we've had,
And we've had letters to on the other side too.
Yeah.
That's
And
my
I'm
point,
not
getting a
I'm not taking
consensus of
sides. I'm suggesting that we
Well,
take this to a forum that people can learn, understand, and I disagree that we can't get to consensus. Consensus doesn't mean that everybody 100% agrees. It means that we've got something that 100% of the people can at least support. And I think we've got examples in surrounding communities of land acknowledgement statements that don't feel the need to wade in some of this divisiveness and cause people to cause this statement to not have the support of the community.
The main thing that I take issue with this particular motion is not, I've mentioned several times that I consider it to be a living document. And I think it needs to be continually looked at and perhaps changed. I personally do not think, with my personal research and listening to comments and listening to other board members, that we need to suspend the current statement in order to do that.
Okay, amend the motion, Dave.
And as we discuss that, that might be an option. I don't know. I haven't thought, I don't know. I want to discuss a little more with fellow board members. But I normally am not a big fan of appointing committees to study things. This could be an exception to that. We do have a committee called the Equity Advisory Committee, which is representative of a lot of these topics, and one of the original ideas or incentives for this came from them. In an early form of that group, they are thoroughly organized now, and that might be something to consider. But I do not believe, I know there are issues that have been brought to our attention with the statement. I want to clarify one thing in my mind. The land acknowledgement is supposed to be just that, and maybe we've carried it through discussion at least well beyond a land acknowledgement. A land acknowledgement to me is an acknowledgement that the land that we are sitting on right now was not always ours, and the method by which it became ours is not something that I feel good about in the past. I can't fix that, but I can acknowledge it. And that's where I come from to start this thing. Many organizations that I am a member of or a citizen of or whatever, I mean, there are land acknowledgements all over the place. And they aren't all the same. They have different tweaks and different emphases, but they are all basically land acknowledgements. I don't, if our land acknowledgement statement, well, first of all, I don't believe it is intended to, I have to choose my words carefully, celebrate the incredible accomplishments of Native Americans, indigenous peoples in this country, what they have done to make the country a wonderful place. I totally agree with that they have done that. But that's not what this statement was intended to address. If in fact it does the opposite, then it needs to be reviewed again. But I don't think that it is, in my mind, I don't think we need to suspend the statement, throw it out and start over.
Point of clarification, that part of the motion was before the offending statement about the Catholic Church was removed. So amend the motion, pull that out. I'm fine to have that conversation.
It's your motion. Are you going to amend it?
I can amend it, sure. But usually the person bringing it up will amend it. I move that we amend the motion on the floor to remove point 1. Do we have to have a vote to amend? And then it would be back on the table. So does somebody
Now
want
we
to
have to
second
discuss
my
the
motion?
amendment.
Yeah, does somebody want to second my motion to amend the motion?
I will.
All right, we have a motion and a second to amend the motion on the floor, removing item number 1.
I'd like to, I mean, if we're going to work through this and find the things that we think should be changed, I would think that the Equity Advisory Board should be part of that committee. They are, some of them, I don't know if, not all of them are the original group, I don't know how many are, but some of them do have that background and knowledge, and they are charged with that work for the library. And I think it would be a huge gap if we did not have those folks included in the subcommittee in
So not agreeing or disagreeing, but I think as a point of order, we have to
Talk about the
vote
amendment.
on
Sure.
the amendment that's
Fair.
on the floor, and then we can reopen it for additional amendments.
I will speak to the amendment.
Okay.
I agree with that amendment. And I will vote in favor of that amendment to remove that statement, which the current statement shall immediately be suspended and removed from the library website, and where practical and feasible from display, and immediately suspend recital of the statement at library board meetings. So we would remove that from the motion. That would not preclude that I'm in favor of all the rest of it. But I am in favor of removing that from the motion, and that, I think, would make the motion, the ensuing discussion more fruitful. I also, just as a side comment, we don't have to make a final decision on this tonight. We might at some point decide to table it, or table is not a bad thing. We could send it back to staff and take it up at a subsequent meeting.
All right, so for the time being, we have a motion and a second to amend the motion to remove item number 1. All those in favor of that amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And all those abstaining? All right, so we are now looking at this motion with item number 1 removed. And we'll open the floor back up to the amended motion.
So, summary of the rest of it, I guess, is that the board will appoint a new subcommittee, a committee that doesn't necessarily exist, but community residents to, and it talks about how it's made up and 7 members and so forth, but it would.
It doesn't address how those members will be appointed, but I'm open to suggesting how we accomplish that, and that certainly could include bringing in members of the Equity Advisory Team. I would disagree that we put this as a, lock, stock, and barrel in the domain of the Equity Advisory Team.
I wouldn't want to not include them, because,
I can-
so then
I would
the
agree with that.
7-person thing might not.
So I'll make a motion to amend it further. Point number 2 currently reads the Board of Trustees shall charter a subcommittee of local residents with Native American lineage, library staff, 1 or 2 members of the board, and I'll add to that members of the Equity Advisory Team. Is there a second to that amendment?
Are we gonna go through like point by point, because then I think
Sorry,
that
can you
triggers.
speak up?
I was asking if that then means we go through this.
Yeah,
kind
it
of
just
a-
means that it was further amended.
Okay, well, just because I think that might trigger other changes further, that's all I'm asking.
I'll second.
Can you repeat the amendment, please? I just don't
Yeah,
want to
the
misquote
Board
it.
of Trustees shall charter a subcommittee of local residents with Native American lineage, library staff, 1 or 2 members of the board, and members of the equity advisory team.
All right, so we have.
To address the offensive deficiencies of the current statement.
I could strike that.
If we could strike that,
We'll take that.
if we'd strike that, I could.
I should, okay, I'll strike that, and I think it's also appropriate to say local resident, not restricted to local residents with Native American lineage, but just local interested parties if there are other concerned stakeholders. So local residents, I'll restate it for clarity. The Board of Trustees shall charter a subcommittee of local residents, including those with Native American lineage, library staff, 1 or 2 members of the board, and members of the equity advisory team to develop a new statement. Period.
Just a question, would it be appropriate, or maybe you just, as consultants, but does that preclude the ability to
They can
invite
figure out how much they want to get involved in it.
outside?
No, in fact, one of the other points of the motion addresses that and
Okay.
leaves that possibility open. This is just the makeup of the committee.
That would be the composition of the committee. And just a side comment, with this committee, I'm trying to remember, with this committee, since it's a subcommittee appointed by the board, be an open meetings committee? In other words,
Yes.
the public could,
All board committees are
I think it would,
subject to Open Meetings Act.
and therefore other interested people could
Yeah.
sit in.
Sure.
All right, so right now we have a motion on the floor with a second to amend item number 2 to read, the Board of Trustees should charter a subcommittee of local residents as well as the Equity Advisory Committee.
Yeah, you want me to read it? State it?
Sure.
The Board of Trustees shall charter a subcommittee of local residents, including those with Native American lineage, library staff, we just shorten it to members of the board, and members of the equity advisory team to develop a new statement.
And you are seconding that, right, Carissa?
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying I will approve the ultimate motion, but I
Right.
can support that amendment.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the amendment just stated by Trustee Meadberg, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And all those abstaining? All right.
Those are 2 separate amendments, I think.
Yeah.
Just for number 1 and number 2. They're both going to be included in the final motion. I hate to get down to nitpicking on this. I wonder if we could think this through and maybe think about it another time. It's 7 members. We've already defined 4 groups that it needs to include.
I guess I put that in just to keep it from getting unwieldy, but I mean, if it's.
I don't know, I'm just raising, does that, do we want to include that in the motion, 7, the right number, or up to
Raise the
7?
cap
or
if you want.
Whatever, I'm just,
It says
I don't
no
even
more
know I
than
have a
7.
position, I'm just bringing that up.
I'm not sure why I landed on 7.
This actually could be a living document too.
Well, that's a good point.
Since the board, so since in point 2, the board is chartering a subcommittee, do we need to right now specify the maximum number?
No.
I mean, just because I don't know
No,
if
it's a
we can
great
remember
point,
it
right?
on that right now.
We can strike the,
To a later determined.
so we can, yeah, I think that's a
Or you
good
could say
point.
no more than.
Yeah,
We could
or
change
just
that.
No more than 20.
Well, I think Carissa's point is the board is going to charter the committee. We can address the number of people.
Yeah, we don't
on the
have to
board
do that
at the point
We don't have
specific in this
to
motion.
put the numbers in
Right.
there.
So,
So strike that.
Strike that. So I will move to amend point 3 and change it to read that the subcommittee shall have access to and shall utilize library resources, additional Native American representatives and sources, which gets to your point, Dave, and past material that was referenced in the development of the current statement.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor to make an amendment to item number 3 that Trustee Nienberg so eloquently stated, and I will not restate. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And all those abstaining?
This is like parliamentary procedure 101 tonight.
Yeah, but
It's really,
it's working, so let's keep going. The fourth item is, the subcommittee shall develop the statement without allegiance to or undue influence from the ILA and ALA guidelines on creating land acknowledgement statement.
how does
And
one
shall
determine?
instead develop the statement based on local history, input from local stakeholders, and sincere and true the desire to honor the strength, resiliency, and rich heritage of Native Americans. That hits a couple of issues that,
I would take that whole thing out. I mean, it kind of goes without saying that that's what the job is that they're going to be doing. And, you know, I mean,
I put it, let me tell you why I put it in there. Because the ILA and ALA guidelines are very prescriptive about how to develop a land acknowledgement statement and what should be in it.
no, there are other resources available too. If we take the entire paragraph out, then it's up to the committee to decide how they're going to proceed and what resources they're going to use for it.
So that's kind of my thought, and my other thing goes back to what Dave said earlier about the purpose of the acknowledgement,
Yeah.
and that I agree with what folks have said tonight about honoring the strength, resilience, and heritage. That isn't necessarily the first intent of a land acknowledgement. So I think that needs to be part of the intent, and like agreeing or coming to consensus or whatever however we want to say, having that discussion
About what is the intent.
about what is intent, I think needs to be part of this work. And I think it was part of the original work, so I think like bringing those, that knowledge back and discussing what that is, I think I would move to just strike all 4 because I think it needs to be part of the discussion of that subcommittee.
Are you moving to amend it to strike paragraph 4?
Sure.
And I'll second.
I would be supportive of that, because I think leaving that in, well, one way to put it is unduly restricts the committee.
Yeah.
And it tells them what to do and what not to do specifically, and I'd like to leave that open, but it makes the motion sound like we are opposed to the recommendations of ILA and ALA, and I can't support that statement.
Yeah.
It also suggests that the statement should honor the strength, resiliency, and rich heritage of Native Americans, and as I said before, I don't know whether that belongs in a land acknowledgement statement.
That's something for the committee to decide.
It's for the committee to decide. It'll be something more than a land acknowledgement statement if we do that.
Right.
So can I just jump in, since we do have, before we get too sidetracked, we do have a motion and a second on the floor to remove or strike item number 4 from the motion. All those in favor, please
I
say
think
aye.
we're in a discussion.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
so.
sorry.
Dave, I don't disagree, especially given your earlier context that maybe the statement has gone too far in other directions. Okay? I think there's probably a valid conversation that committee can have about what is the purpose, including is the purpose that is represented by the current statement.
Yeah. Maybe we need something more than a land acknowledgement statement.
No. There's nothing that
Although
says
if we
that can't
do
be
that-
incorporated into it.
If we do that for indigenous people, we may need to do it with a bunch of other groups. Could be an issue.
For example, I don't know that the land acknowledgement statement needs to take a position on the Dakota pipeline. Like, is that an overreach? Also, it's a valid question on whether it
That's
needs
for the
to
committee to
acknowledge
decide.
the accomplishments of Native Americans. That's a valid question.
Or if that is additional resources beyond the historical, how awful everything is, and we also add
Sure.
other tiers of it. So the motion
I
is on
can
the floor, I
support
think.
removing
The amendment
that
is on the
restriction.
floor.
Any further discussion on this next amendment? All right, all those in favor of striking out item number 4 from the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And all those abstaining? All right, so the motion has been amended further to remove item number 4.
Item number 5 says that requires the committee to come back with a recommendation within 3 months. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, again, just to give insight on my.
It says endeavor.
I was trying to provide some
Endeavor,
kind of
fine.
timeliness so that it didn't turn into a.
I don't want it to take 5 years, but
Yeah,
And-
it does say endeavor, so that's a loophole, right?
May I just
We
comment
tried, we're
that-
not there yet.
May I just comment that given the amount of things included in the 2024 strategic plan, work plan, there is an awful lot that is supposed to get done this year. And a lot of it is not insignificant, including, I want you all to remember that we are starting a building space study that you all will be meeting with the architects at your next meeting. And so there will be some significant time needed by this board to work on the items in the strategic plan. So I just want to remind you all of that.
yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, I know what you're saying about the intent. 3 months seems,
Well, I think
Give me a
given that
number.
we're not suspending the previous one,
that's.
gives us a little bit more,
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the only reason.
Yes, but the flip side of that is, to the extent that people are not a fan of the current one, I don't
Sure.
want to leave it out there for 9 more months while this plays out. Like, I think there's some reasonable, and maybe it's not 3 months, but again, certainly look at the other numbers.
It will be up to us as the board to stay on top of them, see what's going on, so.
We could change it to something more open-ended, like complete in a timely manner.
I don't have a problem with it the way it is, because it just says they're gonna endeavor to do it in 3 months. It either gets done or it doesn't.
Okay. From the chartering of the committee.
We've certainly had enough amendments to it.
I think I would move to strike the last 2 words because I don't want to commit a board to passing what the committee comes up with.
Public review, comment, and a vote.
Well, it says that shall be provided to the board for final deliberation, public review and comment, and
Yes.
You
passage.
discovered my track. Silly to have a motion on that.
We just say possible passage.
Well, just
And consideration by the board.
Consideration.
Passage.
Consideration.
Consideration for passage.
that's what we always do.
Is there anything left of your motion?
Yeah.
Yes. This is absolutely fabulous.
There's a lot
This is
left.
what I hope would play out. I'll make a motion that we amend point 5 to include, to change the final sentence to read final deliberation, public review, comment, and consideration for passage by the board.
do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to revise item number 5 of the motion to read, when it shall be provided to the board for final deliberation, public review, and comment, and consideration for passage. We'll work on some. Any other discussion before we vote on that amendment? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And all those abstaining? All right.
Now we're back to the,
So what works best? This is obviously not something that we've done in the past. Is it helpful for me to reread everything as it was amended?
I don't know whether that would be helpful for the audience or whatever. I think
Personally, I don't need it.
I think we know what's,
Yeah, we know what's on it.
I think
I'm
we
not
know
really
what's
looking
here.
forward to that, but
I'm not quite ready to vote. I've got a couple
That's
more
fine.
questions. Am I the only one with questions?
No, I think so. Now, to get back into any discussions or questions, I'll make a motion to approve the motion to rewrite the DGPL land acknowledgement statement as amended.
Second. You seconded it? Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the motion to rewrite the DGPL land acknowledgement statement with all of the amendments voted on.
That's a little
Now we'll
backwards
open
in
up.
Robert's rules, but it'll work. It's fine. It's fine.
You got the point, right?
It's fine.
So you used to say close enough for government work.
Right.
What do you envision as everybody, not just Bill, the impact on staff load for this job?
My opinion is it would be not much different from the effort they put into maintaining this as a living document, right? There was recent effort applied against it. And it's slightly more in that it is involving more people and there's maybe longer discussions and deliberations. But as far as like the research workload, I would assume that would be similar.
And question for Julie then. You made the statement already that the board and therefore the staff also is going to be pretty busy. But is this an unfunded mandate, so to speak?
I disagree with Trustee Lindberg on the amount of time and energy that this would take from the staff who have put in a lot of time and energy on the land acknowledgement so far this year and have a lot, as I said, the 2024 work plan has a lot of demands on their time. We do have, you know, I have deep concerns about staff's time, energy, and the emotional energy that would be required to participate on the committee as described.
I mean, I guess there's no requirement for staff to be on the committee. The committee could take this up with the experts from the two experts that were involved and access the material that the committee or that the staff has assembled over the years.
I'm not comfortable with us doing anything without staff being involved. I'm sorry.
I would be unlikely to support without our staff because they're our staff. And we've hired them to help us
But I
do
guess we need
things
them to
like
be
this.
involved.
And this is not a simple task, and that cut and dried kind of thing.
How is this, like we said, this is a living document. There's been effort put into it since between November and now. There was effort put into it between the summer and August.
I mean,
Seems like there's a lot of discussion and effort and fallout from the constant discussion at the board meetings. How is this any different? And how is this not a more constructive effort than what we've seen over the past?
I do think just finding a time for all committee members to have availability in their schedule will put a lot of pressure, not only on staff, but everyone else to kind of take time away from, you know, employment duties or be a time that isn't ideal for staff.
And I think if the motion were to revise the current land acknowledgements, it would be more in line with the time maybe they currently spend. But since we're basically saying we are going to start from scratch and have these really potentially emotionally charged and complicated and controversial conversations, it's more than kind of going back to, like Julie described with FAQ, going back to the resources and kind of looking through them. It's much more involved than that.
You don't want to be reinventing the whole process all over again. And
That's a
that's,
fair
that's
point.
why I kept asking questions about what this does that hasn't been done. And I'm still not really clear on that.
I think that's a fair point. It was not my intent to imply that we have to start from scratch and we can't use the current statement as it is a starting point. There's no changing that. to a revised statement. And if it makes everybody more comfortable, we can change the wording to imply that it's a revision of the current statement.
In point 2, where it says to develop a new statement,
To develop the revision.
to revise the existing statement.
Yeah, it does say rewrite, not, it does maybe the bathwater.
That is one of the things, you know, because I know how much time and effort the staff and the equity advisory team and others put into compiling the first version of this. And I really would hate for us to just go, okay, well, that's
Yeah, and
done
again,
and over
totally
with and
agree.
now it's new. I think we need to respect that time, and especially, you know, given the things that we're asking them and us to do this year, I would feel much more comfortable if it were revising the existing statement rather than let's do it all over again, because it does a pretty different.
Just to further clarify, I don't think that the existing statement is 100% without merit. I think there's sections in there that should be part of a revised statement. So I'm totally supportive of fine tuning that language. So I will keep going here. I will move to further amend the statement to say in point 3.
Point 2.
What number is it now?
Point 2.
Well, we'll figure that out.
We struck address the offenses, right? We just said new statement to revise the current statement.
All right, we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to revise item 2 that reads, the Board of Trustees shall charter a subcommittee of local residents with Native American lineage, library staff, and 1 or 2 members of the board. Wait,
As previously
we revised the whole,
amended, yeah.
right, yes.
To revise.
I can
A second
restate it,
time.
like,
Sure.
the Board of Trustees shall charter a subcommittee of local residents, including those of Native American lineage, library staff, members of the board, and members of the equity advisory team to revise the current land acknowledgement statement.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion and a second, so now we can discuss. If there is any additional discussion.
Remember, it was just discussion on the amendment.
Right. All right, all those in favor of approving the amendment to the motion, as Trustee Nienberg stated, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And all those abstaining?
Okay, we don't need another motion. We have amended the original
still the
motion.
one's on the table.
Motion is the
So
motion is still on the
if
table.
we're gonna change something more, then we'll amend it, but we don't
Motion
need
is
to
still on the
do it.
table.
The only thing I'm kind of left with is the staff issue, the timing issue, the amount of work for the board and for the staff, not to mention for the committee that first has to be formed and then charged with the what their responsibility is. And with everything else that's on our plate right now, I'm a little troubled by that.
Assuming
What if this
people
takes 2 years?
Volunteer on the committee or want to be part of it, right? Other than that, taking staff out of it, setting the staff issue aside, other members of the committee.
No, I don't want to leave this.
But just for a moment, other members of the committee will be people that want to participate. They're not, I don't think we have subpoena powers. We can't force them to be on the committee, right? They're gonna raise their hands and say, we would like to be part of this.
Well, my suspicion is it's going to take us a while to agree on who ought to be on the committee. And then,
We remove the cap.
well, I know, but we still have to appoint people to the committee and then give them we don't just say revise the committee, revise the statement. We need to give them some sort of a charge so they know what to do and when they're done. And imagine they're doing that without some staff support. And I don't want to imply, even with the endeavor at the end, that they gotta get this done this summer. Because we have many other things as a board and also as a staff to get done by this summer.
Well, we already removed the hard cap on the timing. It takes longer because it's requiring a longer runway.
I guess I would need to have an understanding that we would not even have to appoint the committee until we get to a little breathing space. We won't put that in the motion, but it would have to be understood. I wouldn't require that we get this thing going within a month, because it's going to take a lot of work to get it going.
Well, it just says that the board would charter this committee. It doesn't put a deadline on for when we do that.
I just want the minutes to reflect that I said that. You know.
Well, and then I think, to your earlier points about like accountability and working toward a strategic plan, is part of that discussion of, the mandate and who's involved and whatnot. Also, have a very real conversation about start, stop, continue, right? So if this is something that, 2 staff, 3 staff, let's say, are involved with, that would affect the things that they are on the hook for already this year because they've already written their annual goals. What are the things that they would not reasonably be able to divide their time and do? They have a pie, that is their time, and now we're taking a slice of it that would have been devoted to programs or devoted to some other committee work or other things that they're on the desk or things like that. And I think that would need to be part of our conversation.
I'm fine with that being part of the conversation. It does feel a little contradictory to say, hey, this is a living document, there's been efforts put against it in recent history, and now all of a sudden we can't find any time to put against it. I think that's a little contradictory.
It's not that
I don't think
anytime.
anyone is saying.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
so
not
then
that
maybe we
anytime.
limit it to the same amount of time that would be spent maintaining the living document goes towards this committee, and that's a workable solution. But to just say we're not going to do it because we don't have time kind of flies in the face of the fact that we've spent time on it.
Our staff is going to want to spend some time on this, and they're going to need some time on this because it's going to have the name of Downers Grove Public Library on it. And the staff needs to research and at least give a strong opinion on whatever appears with the Downers Grove Public Library name on it, just as the board will need to. So saying that the staff doesn't have to do very much, I think is...
There's a lot of that research already.
Well, I don't know, but...
I'd like to take a little bit of a detour on this too and say, regardless of whether this passes or not, there's nothing that keeps any member of the public from contacting the library and saying, I've got a suggestion for something that should go into the next revision. That process is ongoing. We've had a lot of analysis from public over the last several years and several months since I've been on the board, and it could be useful then to take that and say, here, what would you like to see? It doesn't even have to be this formal a process for there to be community input into later revisions of this living document.
Yeah, but playing devil's advocate, they also don't have to take it into account. And it kind of takes it out of the context of a true collaboration.
Well, I'm just saying
You're not wrong.
there are other channels.
But I think that totally changes the nature of the effort.
Maybe so.
And I just want to clarify, I didn't say that I didn't think we should spend time on it, that we wouldn't have time. It's just there is a finite amount of time to be had. And then we've already charged staff with doing many things this year. So it's not to say, but we just need to be mindful of that.
I'm just not convinced that we're just not starting all over again on something that's already just
and
played itself out.
Anyone who's been on any committee like this, even on something that's less complicated than a land acknowledgement, knows that it's exponentially more work than just going off by yourself or with 2 or 3 people and doing because of those conversations, because of the thoughtfulness that our staff and presumably the other people who would be involved in this would bring to the table. So it's not necessarily the equivalent of the same, like someone going and looking at the websites they looked at originally and doing that. It's doing that, but then also bringing it to 12 different personalities, however many different personalities, and saying, okay, this is what I found. Oh, you found something different. Okay, what's the nuance of that? What's the nuance? There's so much like involved. So I'm just saying, like that it's not an easy calculation, and I don't want to again put undue pressure on staff when we've already asked them to do a lot.
I don't think it's unreasonable to say that we'll take the same amount of time that's spent maintaining the living document and apply it to this, and if it takes longer, it takes longer. I still think the pearl's worth the dive. You come out of the effort with something that is the Downers Grove land acknowledgement statement, not one group's land acknowledgement statement.
But we're the Downers Grove Public Library.
We're the Downers Grove Public Library.
But not, it can be the broader set of library stakeholders and constituents, not just something that staff developed.
Right, but the equity team was involved, and there were community members on the equity team.
Well, it is.
I'm just letting you know there were equity team members. There was a board member. There was Midwest Soaring Foundation involved. Dr. Lowe was involved. It wasn't just like two staff members writing it. I just want to make that part clear. That it wasn't.
Sorry,
it
I didn't
wasn't,
mean to imply
No,
that.
I'm not saying that you did. I'm just saying that it wasn't just like two people in a room by themselves
And
doing
ultimately,
something.
it still will, because this board will need to deliberate and consider and vote on whatever the output of this committee is.
And as to the time that staff generally puts in on the land acknowledgement in any given year, in 2023, we already put in almost as much time as was spent creating the original document in reviewing the information multiple times. And again, I have concerns about adding that yet again immediately after, because in general there had been, when we did it in 2021, took a look at it in 2022, it was not the larger process that it turned into in 2023 with the more major revisions, and I just have concerns about.
Well, we can either do it proactively or we can continue to do it reactively.
Well,
to my other board members, we talked about making a sincere effort to build bridges, do outreach to people that may not share our opinions, and build consensus. If we don't pass this, I think we are walking away from that. Call it a pledge, call it a commitment we made to each other to start to turn the tide. And to do that because we don't have time, then what do we have time for?
Everything in the strategic plan.
So what's the basis for our strategic plan if the community, with all due respect, like this is a trustee debate. This is something that we said is important, and it is part of the strategic plan. There were elements of the strategic plan that spoke to building a better consensus on these matters within the community.
Often you use the word community support, and I'm only saying this because we did hear from the community, right? People filled out the survey, and we had, I don't know how many responses to the survey, or people told us what was important to them. So when you say the community doesn't support us, that's a weird thing to say when we do have a lot of community support.
No, I didn't say the community doesn't support us.
I'm just like, you were saying, can you repeat what you said then?
Yeah, I said that one of the things that we heard in the strategic plan is that the community wants us to be less divisive and more inclusive on these types of matters.
Okay,
This is our opportunity to follow through on that. This is our first opportunity to follow through on that. Not to mention follow through on the discussions we had with each other.
I'm really conflicted here, and I'm trying to figure out how I can make a decision on this existing motion. I'm concerned about staff support. I'm considering about how we appoint the committee and some other details, but more than anything else, I'm trying to balance the conflicting things in my head. And I'm wondering if if I'm pressed, I'll take a vote tonight, but I'm wondering if...
Dave, isn't it compelling that you just learned how much time was spent on it in 2023 reacting to the discontent over this statement?
I understand that.
Isn't that compelling?
I understand that. I do. And I don't want to do that for
All right, I would like to hear what Julie has to say.
I just wanted to go back to Trustee Sladek's statement about her point about the group on next door, where the land acknowledgement statement was brought up in a very positive way, and over 90 community members responded very positively about our current land acknowledgement statement. Also, that we have received quite a few letters, emails of support that have gone directly to the library board that maybe weren't stated, that weren't read out here in public comment, but went directly to the board that were in support. So the voices in the community are not only the ones in this room. And Trustee Sladek had brought that up earlier.
Never said they were, and I think that's part of the point. The point is there's different opinions, and it ranges the spectrum. And we shouldn't pick and choose sides. We should try to work to build bridges and understanding and hear each other and learn and come up with something that's better that everybody can be at least supportive of, if not 100% in agreement of.
All right, so given the timing at this point, I do think that we could probably discuss this for probably a good 2 more hours, but, so we would need a motion, correct?
There's one.
Well,
There's
the options at this point are we have a motion on the floor. We can vote on that motion. We can sleep on it for 1 month, not discuss it extensively further, but at least come to some, as I say, I'm personally very conflicted. It's something I want to do in a sense because to be responsive to the community, but it's something that I feel is potentially a burden for our staff.
But whether this is the best way to go about it, or whether existing processes would allow whatever revisions need to be made.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Let's start with
For
that.
what? The original motion was second,
Okay.
and we've amended it, so the motion is on the floor.
For the amendments, all the amendments.
I feel because of the conflicted nature in my head that I don't feel comfortable voting in favor of this motion right now. That doesn't mean I won't be at another time.
What information would you need to reach, get to the point where you want to make a decision this
I,
time?
part of it is resolving in my head the balancing of community relationships with our staff relationships. And at the moment, with everything that is on our plate and the staff plate in implementing a strategic plan that we already have approved a work plan for, I'm concerned about that. On the other hand, we've given some pretty good reasons why we maybe should do this sometime. I'm not sure this is the time, and I'm not sure I want to well, I think I said it. If I'm pressed right now, I think I have to vote against it.
You can motion to table it.
But if we can sleep on it for a month or two and bring it up again when we're individually prepared to do that, am I the only one that feels this way? Am I just kicking the can down the road? But
Well, yes, but it may be appropriate sometimes to kick the can down the road.
For me, this comes down to how much importance do we place on this as representative of the change in tone and direction dynamics that we said we wanted to affect.
A lot. But we have many other things in that same category that we've already put in our work plan
What?
for the next, we voted the work plan in
Yeah, I know,
November.
but the work plan doesn't address the conversations that we had as a board.
Doesn't
about
address
wanting
this
to-
issue specifically, but
No, not this, I'm
It
talking about
addresses
this
a bunch of
specific
other
issue. I'm
things.
talking about this specific issue as representative of the bigger conversation that we had, Dave.
the bigger,
The conversation that we had about trying to change the tone and the divisiveness, short circuit the divisiveness, try to build bridges, reach out to people that,
well,
right, we had that conversation and we all looked at each other in the eye and said we wanted to affect that.
I think we perhaps have different opinions on how to address those things. I don't believe we all agreed on the,
So sorry.
hmm?
Are you finished? Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
I'm not ready to vote, but yes, I'm finished.
I kind of want to say, and I'm not exactly sure how to phrase this the best way, but so I 100% agree. The board has an opportunity to involve different voices and to hear those voices and to consider them. I don't know what other opportunities there are down here, but the putting it on the land acknowledgement, which isn't, how do I say this, like, I don't know if the land, I'll go back to kind of what I said before, I'm not sure if the land acknowledgement exists for us to feel good about the taking of Native American land. So like, I would rather,
I would disagree.
I would rather whatever, moving forward as a board, whatever that expanded conversation looks like, we spend that first effort on something that really will have an immediate impact on us as a board, and the intent is for the community. This is for the community, but it's not, I don't know.
Don't you think this has had an effect on the board over the last?
Yes, I do, and that was a compelling, I don't remember who said it, like, I think you did, like proactive versus reactive. I mean, if we're spending this much time already reacting, that's a lot of time, and that's unfortunate. I just don't, like, this particular issue, I don't know if it's the one to hold up as emblematic of the first kind of example.
That one is.
I don't know. That's why I started. Because I haven't had a chance to think about it and go back and look, because I wasn't anticipating having this much of an in-depth conversation. And I think the conversation's been great. I mean, Dave's been.
I just wonder if there are ways for us to engage the community on an ongoing basis, as we did with the strategic plan, but on less specific issues, so that we've got a constant flow of feedback and information coming in across the board, rather than just one kind of thing. I don't know. My big concern at this point, and obviously I believe we needed to really discuss this thoroughly, is that it's pretty much been done. And is this really going to accomplish that much that hasn't been accomplished or that can't be accomplished other ways?
What's done?
The whole issue of revising the land acknowledgement.
Well,
I mean, there are mechanisms in
How
place
is
to
it
do
done?
that now.
There are numerous issues that have been brought to this board that have not been addressed by the revisions. They addressed one thing.
Yeah,
It's not done.
do
It's not close
one
to
thing
done.
at a time.
we have two options right now, I think. We can either vote on this, and as I mentioned, I think I have to vote against it, but other people have different ideas. Or we could table it and continue the discussion when a majority of the board feels we are ready to continue it. That's an unpopular thing in some circles. It's not one we've used much. But if we think that there are some more things to discuss or just things to think about individually, or to take a different approach on the same general topic, we could do that. Right now, I'm not quite ready to.
Dave, if you want to make a motion to table it, make a motion to table it.
Sir, I have an ability to speak my mind and explain what I'm doing.
That's fine, I mean, but are we?
If you don't like what I'm saying, then don't listen. I'm sorry.
I'm not, it's not that I don't like what you're saying, I'm just saying, if you would like to make a motion to table it, make a motion to table it. If you feel
I
like that's
said we have two options, and I was trying to get a little feedback from people. If there's no feedback, then I will make a motion to table.
All right, we now have a motion to table this issue till next month. Do we have a second on that? All right, we do not have a second. Well, in that case, then we will proceed on voting. All right. All those in favor of approving the motion to rewrite the DGPL land
Take it out.
acknowledgements?
Roll call vote.
Sure. We'll go, yeah, proceed. Roll.
Okay. Trustee Doherty,
Yes.
Trustee Humphries,
No.
Trustee Kuntia,
No.
Trustee Nienberg,
Yes.
Trustee Sladak,
No.
President Gagani.
No. All right, the motion to rewrite the land acknowledgement has not been passed. All right, the next item on our agenda is the executive session. Do we have a motion to move into executive session?
I'll make a motion to move
Go
to
into executive session and to conclude tonight's meeting at the
yes.
end of the executive session.
Oh, we do have an action item though.
We do have an
Oh, we
action.
do have this right now, sorry.
All those in favor of moving into executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're back to open session. And do we have?
Hit it. I move that we give our library director a 5% raise.
Do we have a second? All right, we have a motion.
Is that just we have a second?
Was that a Dave second?
We need to rehearse this better next time. All right, we have a motion and a second to increase the library director's salary by 5%. Let's go ahead and do a roll call for this.
Okay. Trustee Doherty?
Yes.
Trustee Humphries?
Yes.
Trustee Kuntia?
Yes.
Trustee Nienberg?
Yes.
Trustee Sladak?
Yes.
President Gagani?
Yes. All right, the motion is passed. Congratulations. Thank you, Director Miller. And thank you for everything. And we can adjourn the meeting.